a Wednesday. That song was awesome. Still is. When I was a kid, from Terry Cashman talking baseball. And we'll be talking Pascal Siakam. That news is the big of the day, undoubtedly. But over the course of today, the conversation will come up about Willie Mays and his passing. That news came out. I went to the U.S. swimming trials last night, which was very cool. We'll get to that as well. And it was when I was leaving that I saw the news. So, Eddie Garrison, I will refer to you on this because you are probably the biggest baseball fan of the three of us. Last night, when was it announced that Willie Mays had passed? I know that he passed away in the afternoon, but when was it actually announced?
Just before 9 o'clock.
Okay. So it was last evening when it was announced. And on this Juneteenth, happy Juneteenth to you, a holiday that, of course, celebrates the emancipation in this country, and a federal holiday, so you will not get mail today and you can't go to the bank, but a well-deserved and well within its place significant holiday. Willie Mays, in my opinion, and I got into a debate with somebody about this last night, and I think part of it just becomes the definition of the word iconic. But Willie Mays, to me, was at this time yesterday, or whatever time technically he passed, but when Willie Mays passed, he was at the moment the greatest American, let me rephrase that, the most iconic American living sports figure. That doesn't mean most famous. That doesn't mean most marketable. It means the most iconic. And to me, with icon means symbolism. It means representation. It means a number of different things in terms of your legacy going above and beyond the niche for which you were most known. And Willie Mays, as an American baseball player, and notably as an African-American baseball player, was the largest sports icon that we had alive yesterday. And you could certainly debate who that would become now, but we will get into what Willie Mays meant coming up in a bit on the show. Good afternoon to you on this Juneteenth and Wednesday. My name is Jake Query. Eddie Garrison, you just heard from. Jimmy Cook is here as well. It's Query & Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. The big news of the day. We anticipated this becoming news sometime today, tomorrow, or certainly before the weekend. But, Jimmy, I'm going to declare it somewhat of a victory. I've taken up a couple of causes on this radio show of late. I have a new one that I'm going to harp on and obsess over that I will announce later today. But one of the things that I've talked about when we've mentioned Pascal Siakam 100 times, when it came to re-signing Pascal Siakam, what was the thing that I kept saying over and over and over and over, and everyone told me I was nuts?
You were worried about the length of the contract.
I was worried about the length of the contract.
Because of his age.
He's not old by any stretch.
No, but if it was a 5 or 6 year deal, he'd be 35, 36 years old by the time it's done.
I think it shows that, and I give tons of credit, Kevin Pritchard, Chad Buchanan, the Pacers organization, by getting Pascal Siakam to agree to a 4-year deal. Now, granted, it's still going to pay him a healthy sum. And he got the max money that he was allowed under the agreement with going to a team that had traded for him. You know, you didn't have like the Supermax, the bird rights, etc. But Siakam getting 4 years and not 5, to me, that is a win. Now, what we know is this. What we know is that once the salaries kick in, the combination of Tyrese Halliburton, Pascal Siakam, and Miles Turner will account for 75% of the Pacers' payroll. 60% of the payroll is going to be tied up between their big two, Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam. You got to get creative, but a 4-year as opposed to 5-year deal, I realize, Jake, what are you talking about? That's one season. Why are you making a big deal out of that? I get it. But because I do think that the wear and tear, the number of games, everything else coming into play, there is no reason to believe that you're not going to get 3 and maybe even a total of 4 outstanding years from Pascal Siakam. But precedent, the law of averages, and just looking at other players indicates that around 35 is when you start to see the fall off. And they are now not going to be on the hook for that in year number 5. And if there is no fall off, great. Then in 4 years, you re-sign him again. And you probably are the clubhouse leader to do so. But I think it gives Jimmy some good flexibility for Indiana, especially when looking at the staggering of some of their other contracts that are eventually going to be coming up for re-sign.
It is perfectly centered around the championship window or windows of Tyrese Halliburton. Tyrese is, 24 years old, 25 years old, right around there. And his contract length goes until the 28-29 season. Factor that in with where Pascal Siakam's contract would go in theory, being a 4-year deal once he puts pen to paper. That takes you to the 27-28 season. So 4 years together, starting with this extension that'll kick in once he puts, again, pen to paper when the moratorium period opens, I think on the 6th of July. And this is your first of, in theory, I'm not saying the Pacers are guaranteed to have a championship window, but if you're mapping this out, this is the first of 2, maybe 2.5, if you will, depending on how long and how much longevity Halliburton has within him over the course of his career. Still not even at the precipice of his prime just yet. But it lines up with the first championship run, championship window that you're going to build around. You have 2 foundational pieces now locked in for the long haul. You still have one more season of Miles Turner before he would become an unrestricted free agent in 25-26. And then you still have the rookie contract flexibility and control with Benedict Mathurin and Jarris Walker. Plenty of ways to play with your money from a budding young standpoint, still having, as you mentioned, Jake, the seeds that grow into the flowers of your championship campaign here in the next couple of years. This had to get done. You had to find a way to get a deal with him done. In 27-28, when it's Pascal Siakam at age 34, it is going to be a lot of money. It'll be right up there with what Tyrese Halliburton's projected to make, about $52.4 million, at least the estimates there from Spot Rack. You never know what the specifics are going to be. They just give you a range based on cap percentage and what's been reported. But in all likelihood, it is going to be a pretty penny, though I am with you. And I was with you on the whole side of things. I'm not mad they gave him a 4-year deal. My point to you was you were worried that people were going to think you were nuts. And I was like, I don't think you're nuts. It is tough to give him a 5th year, but if you're forced to do it, you do it. Clearly they weren't. Clearly they got to the right monetary space that Pascal Siakam wanted them to be at, even with it being a 4-year deal instead of a 5-year deal. And to that end, if you see him not falling off by the time you get to the 28-29 campaign, then you have an opportunity, you would think, to win him back, to bring him back as a veteran. This is mapping way too far out of what this team could be in 4 or 5 years. The point is, though, you have him locked in now. You have a tandem that you see being your foundational pieces moving forward, and now you can shift your attention to other important aspects of where this team is at, like Andrew Nembhard, and he would likely, you would think anyway, right, Jake, be the next extension piece on their checklist for this offseason, at least if all the reports are true.
Yeah, I mean, Nembhard's an interesting one because Andrew Nembhard, who is signed through the 26th season, but Andrew Nembhard, at $2 million a year, I mean, he is the most value of all values, right? The guy's playing at a $15 million a year clip, and he's making $2 million a year. And that was a real coup, the way that they got Andrew Nembhard and immediately signed him to that deal when he was a second-round pick and locked him in at $2 million a year, which if you're Andrew Nembhard at the time, you're like, it's great. I'm a second-round pick, and I'm making $2 million a year. Then he goes out and plays when there's opportunity, makes the most of it, and you're going, wait a minute, this guy's worth way more than that. But in terms of contracts moving forward, you've got Jarris Walker, who's under contract through 27, okay? You've got, in addition to that, Nesmith, who is up in 27. And then you have Ben Shepherd, who's up in 27. Those are the guys that still have that much left. After that, or before that, I should say, in 26, and this is where the decision comes in the way that you stagger this. the guys that are coming up for a new contract at the end of next season, I don't mean this coming season, but that have 2 years left, that would be Benedict Mathurin. That again, Nembhard is 2 years left, sorry, and Kendall Brown's probably gone, right? But you have kind of this staggering of the guys that you've got to get taken care of, because then you also have Isaiah Jackson to think about at the end of next season, this coming season. Jalen Smith also. So you have young players that you got to figure out what you're doing. TJ McConnell, scheduled to make $9 million this coming season and then is off the books. Do you re-sign him? A lot to figure out for them. A lot. But
you're in the right place, though. The decisions you now have to make are things you can go match a contract with a restricted free agent.
Correct.
Or go over your bird rights.
Your two biggest hurdles are over, right?
Yes. Yep.
And now it's a matter of piecemealing things around it. You're going to lose realistically when you look at the core key young players for the Pacers: Nembhard, Nesmith, Mathurin, Jackson, Jarris Walker, Shepard. You're going to lose probably two of those guys at some point along the way. At some point along the way, you're going to lose two of those guys. And it's not always easy to lose guys. But then sometimes you look at players that you became married to and you fell in love with and you've been loyal to and you've waited by and you've dreamt about, and something comes along that is better and works better for you. Boston is a prime example. Marcus Smart was a dyed-in-the-wool Celtic. He was a franchise guy. But they had an opportunity to move him to get better-fitting pieces that allowed them more flexibility for their top two. And they did, and look how it worked out for them. Those are not always easy decisions to make, but they're decisions that you have to make regardless.
This is also and I want to make this clear on the front end. I've always been a big fan of his whole arc, his whole story of Miles Turner. But this is going to be a very interesting season for him, because it's probably, assuming there's no extension that takes place before then, it's probably his last big money contract of his career, assuming it's a long-term deal that he would get following this season, because he's an unrestricted free agent, and he'll be, I don't know Turner's birthday offhand, so I apologize for that, but he's currently 28 years old. So by the time that he hits restricted free agency, he would be, by the time he hits unrestricted free agency, again, assuming there's no type of deal that's worked out before then, he'd be 29. That's probably his last big payday. This will be a question as the season unfolds next year, but what are the Pacers willing to pay to make him their third star in this core? Because you could make the argument, and it's been made for a long time. I'm not talking about him as a trade piece. I'm talking about his value to the league across all teams that could be interested in him. If he was to make it to the open market next offseason, that would be a piece I could see suitors being highly interested in, to the point that a bidding war would occur. So that's just, again, all part of this map out that Kevin Pritchard and Chad Buchanan have to work through. But that's a problem for tomorrow. The problem for today has been solved. You have your two biggest pieces of this core now locked in, and outside of the Turner conversation that will occur throughout this offseason, or through this season, I beg your pardon, all the stuff that's on your books is, as you talked about it yesterday when I overpaid for my Escalade and we were trying to play through 3 cars on a budget. Well, the Pacers have high-level flexibility with what they have to budget for now, because it's all restricted or stuff in your control with bird rights, the players that are left to negotiate with outside of Miles Turner.
Bobby Marks will join us coming up, by the way, bottom of the hour, just about 15 minutes from now. ESPN NBA front office insider. We will talk to him about this situation with the Pacers and what it means for them. Also, just in terms of their cap, as Jimmy was just mentioning, for the players that are around him. We'll take a look at the NBA draft with Bobby as well. That conversation about 15 minutes from now. Last night, we went to the swimming trials. It was very cool. The one thing that surprised me a little bit, I guess I should have known this. There's no reason I would not have known this, but it was a relatively fast session. I mean, we got in there, things started at 8. We were done by 9:30. I mean, it's like boom, 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 boom. Did see a world record, so that was very cool. If you are planning on going, here's my tip. If you are still planning on buying tickets and going to the U.S. swimming trials, buy in the 400 level in the corners. We were in 422, which is kind of like, to use a football term, The pool is set up going across the football field at about the, I'd say probably goal line to 10-yard line. And the backdrop is probably, I'm going to guesstimate, at the 20-yard line. And so it's just that south end of Lucas Oil Stadium. I think it's south end, and if you are up top, even if you're in the 600 level, I think you're okay. The problem with being in the lower level sections is that you are basically at eye level of the pool. And when you're watching something that close, you want to be looking down on it. It gives you better perspective of who's leading, who's behind. 400 level was absolutely perfect. You get a seat anywhere in that place in the 400 level, those are the creme de la creme seats. But we were leaving, and that's when I saw that Willie Mays had passed away. And here's the thing about Willie Mays. I was born in 1972. I am not going to sit here and lie and tell you that I saw Willie Mays play baseball. I saw Willie Mays get a base hit at the RCA Dome in 1984 when Indianapolis was trying to get a Major League Baseball team and put on an exhibition game of old-timers to try to show that baseball could be played here for the Indianapolis Aeros to land a franchise. I saw him get a base hit, but that's it. I didn't see Willie Mays as a New York Met circling around under fly balls with the phrase of Willie Mays as a Met, which became a euphemism of playing past your prime. And I obviously did not see him as a New York or San Francisco Giant or even as a Negro League player where he played in, I believe, the final Negro League World Series. But what I know is this. What I know is that baseball was the American pastime. Sure, it's still labeled as such, but there was a time in this country's history, and in particular a time when this country was going through its greatest era, but also some of its greatest struggles, where baseball was the escape and resolve. And some of its biggest stars escaped baseball, pardon the pun that way, but had to leave it for a year or two to serve this country in the military. Among those that did that, a young kid named Willie Mays, who served in 52 and I believe 53 as well, then came back and in 54, still one of the most valuable player and made arguably the most famous catch in the history of baseball in the World Series in 1954. Willie Mays is the greatest five-tool player in the history of baseball. He is the only player to bat 300 in a career that also included 600 career home runs and 10 or more gold gloves, which he won, I believe, 12. He is arguably the greatest defensive player of all time. He also led the league in steals on multiple occasions. He is widely considered by baseball historians to be the greatest player of all time. Babe Ruth is the most legendary. Hank Aaron might have been the most consistently powerful. Sandy Koufax might have been the most breathtaking in a short period. Bob Gibson might have been the most intimidating. But all-encompassing, all told, I think it's safe to say that Willie Mays was the greatest player of all time. If not, he is certainly within the breadth of the conversation. But what he more so was this. Willie Mays was the oldest living member of the Baseball Hall of Fame. And he was the final link to a golden era of the sport and its relationship with the United States of America. And I'm talking about an era where the film was in black and white, the world was in black and white, kids raced home to listen to the radio for day games of the World Series because not every game was on television, and it created a theater of the mind for kids that was fairly appropriate in that time because kids were listening to the description of their heroes. And what they were listening to on the radio was the description of a man that ran like the wind, chased down fly balls, threw people out from center field to third base, and hit big towering home runs. What they didn't hear on the radio in 1950 or 1955 was that he was a black man. And in this country at that time, that was significant because many of the kids that were listening to that probably were being raised in households where that was taboo. Quite frankly, in a world where this was the case, for many people in the United States, Willie Mays was their first black friend. And I know that sounds hyperbole, but there's an element of truth to it in terms of what he represented. The integration of baseball, starting with Jackie Robinson, was cemented largely by the say hey kid because he had a wide grin. He was known for the fact that the way he would greet people with the say hey, hey, say hey if you see me. He was ubiquitous amongst the American pop culture eventually, especially in his later years, making appearances on variety shows, doing shows like Home Run Derby on Saturdays where kids could see it. And suddenly, many people were introduced to a baseball player that looked different than they, but all they knew was the fact that they had a common bond through sport. And all of those things represent a different era. Some of those aspects of the era are thankfully gone. Some of the aspects of that era we long for. The romanticized nature of it with baseball and its love affair with the American culture. But Willie Mays, quite frankly, was the last piece of that little floating piece of glimmering ticker tape that was baseball's heyday. And his passing is indeed the end of an era, and it's for those reasons that he was indeed an American icon, and perhaps the largest that walked upon us yesterday, because he was living proof of an era that we only hear about now through legacy and see through old film and old tape. But there was a time where baseball produced the biggest American heroes, and baseball produced the biggest American fan base, and baseball allowed for this country to start to bridge the gap between black and white America. And Willie Mays was a massive piece of that. And in addition to that, in a time when Willie Mays grew up in an era where this country wasn't overly kind to he or his predecessors and ancestors, at his peak as a baseball player, he represented this country in fighting for it as a member of the United States military. And he was indeed one of the last great baseball heroes. There certainly are now many conversations that can be had about who becomes the greatest living baseball player. I think Barry Bonds would certainly merit conversation, the godson of Willie Mays, mind you. Ken Griffey Jr. would merit consideration. There are 20 different guys that you could debate and argue till the cows come home. Greg Maddux. I mean, you could go with, but each of those guys was great for one or two or three things that made them unique. And in Willie Mays' case, he was the best at like 3 to 4 to 5 different areas of the five-tool player. But you will hear plenty about Willie Mays, far more in depth, far more eloquently, and far more intelligently than I just displayed for you. But, Jimmy, I think it is important for people like myself that were not alive during his heyday as a player to step back and recognize and realize the greatness in totality that was Willie Mays.
Yeah, I mean, I thought you did it rather eloquently. I don't think I could add much more to that. He was an icon of a generation. Every single baseball greatest players list that you find, he's either going to be right there at number one or just behind Babe Ruth. But in the totality of the sport, one of the all-time greats, no doubt the greatest outfielder to ever play the game, a generational five-tool athlete. You mentioned his service time in Korea. Not only did it on the field, but did it for his country, and a massive part of bridging the gap throughout black and white America coming together in a process that, is still occurring today. So we lost a legend yesterday. For people that you mentioned, you didn't see him play. Clearly, Eddie and I did not see him play, but I think everybody that's a baseball fan knows of and is familiar of the catch itself and being one of the most iconic plays in the history of the sport, if not the most iconic play in the history of the sport in that World Series. You can't look at a baseball archive or a library or a poster shop and not have a clip of that baseball lost a legend yesterday. And as you mentioned, it's now it really is crazy to think about, but as you mentioned it, with that era of baseball, there are few left,
for sure,
if any, of living memory of that time of baseball's apex as America's pastime.
The catch itself, I don't know which makes it better. The fact that it's like the basket catch that he makes, or the immediate like quick turn and spin to throw it back in, which is awesome. By the way, Luis Aparicio is now the oldest living Hall of Fame player. The Venezuelan is 90 years old. Pascal Siakam is in the mix for the next 4 years for the Pacers. Bobby Marks going to join us next. We will talk about exactly that.
This hour of The Fan is...
Well, Pascal Siakam might not need a whole lot of money, but he's about to get it from the Indiana Pacers. If you are just joining us, where have you been? Pascal Siakam getting a 4-year deal. It is the max salary for Indiana. That announcement coming earlier today. Bobby Marks is with ESPN. He's an NBA front office insider. He joins us on the CarX Tire and Auto Guest line. Bobby, I appreciate the time. I'll get right to this. I thought it was a coup for Indiana, even though this sounds really minuscule, that this is a 4 and not 5 year deal, just to give them some flexibility. Is that unusual that a player would agree to the 4 as opposed to 5 year thing?
No, not necessarily. I mean, just considering that, 4 years is the most that he would have been able to get from another team out in free agency here. So I think, I think the days of, unless you're probably Jason Tatum this offseason, getting a 5 year max type contract with this collective bargaining agreement, certainly Tyrese is on a 5 year deal, but I think when you start to kind of creep up there a little bit in age, I think those 5 year deals kind of haunt you a little bit in the back end here. So I thought it was really good value as far as from Indiana's to get it to 4. Certainly Pascal gets the max that he was looking for. So I think it's these are you guys know these negotiations. There's got to be a kind of a compromise from both sides, and I think both sides reached that.
How much of this, Bobby, if you are Chad Buchanan, Kevin Pritchard, you got to get Siakam locked in. I get that, right? But when you look at their young core, and they have a young core, I don't need to list all the names. I mean, you and our listeners are aware of the young pieces that they have. Do you go into this trying to already start to figure out the jigsaw puzzle of who can be retained and for how long and for how much? Or do you kind of more take care of problem A and then start thinking about the rest of the jigsaw puzzle?
Yeah, I mean, I think you certainly know when you start Siakam at that number, then okay, this is what we have. This is what we have to operate. Now it turns to certainly the restricted free agency of Obi Toppin as far as how do you fit his number in, and you try to stay under the luxury tax and do so, and then it turns to TJ's McConnell's extension here. But I think the benefit that Indiana has, when we've kind of talked about it all year, is that when you have so many young players and the Neesmith contracts at a really good value, when you've got Mathurin, Jarris Walker, who we really didn't see this year, you've got a young group of players, that helps when you have two players making north of $40 million like Halliburton and Siakam do. So now, it's a big jigsaw puzzle here, right? You go from a team that had cap flexibility for the last 3 or 4 years. Now all of a sudden, your salaries start to creep up, and that kind of forces you to make tough decisions and kind of operate within a budget.
Bobby Marks is our guest, ESPN NBA front office insider. He joins us on the Car X Tire and Auto guest line. Bobby, oftentimes in a market like Indiana, whenever there is a player to re-sign or a player to acquire, whenever the contract and the bill comes due, there are sometimes contracts you look at after the fact and it's like, well, that was a team that signed that player because they know they're unlikely to get somebody of similar value to come here to play in this market, or they were scared of losing him because they just were fearful of where their team would go from a both win-loss standpoint and a ticket standpoint. Why is this not a scared move by the Pacers? Why is this a core move that's going to be a foundational piece for them moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think you saw it in January. I think the ability to kind of identify going out and getting an all-star like Siakam in a trade instead of waiting until free agency, when he could become available, and then you're sitting on cap space. I just think the days of, you guys know, the days of signing players, I don't care if you're in Indiana or in LA. I mean, the days of the ability to sign players in free agency, I think those are kind of long gone. I mean, free agents do not change hands regularly here. Maybe Paul George will this offseason, but Fred VanVleet and Jalen Brunson are really the two main guys over the last couple of years here. So I don't think it's, I think you knew what the cost was going to be in January. You knew what you had to give up in draft equity and players here. And it wasn't like, you get to a conference finals and like, oh man, now we're going to max this guy. No, I mean, I think you kind of penciled in that $42 million number, in mid-January. And now you kind of see it in real life. And now you kind of have, what you have working going forward.
Bobby, realistically, in a perfect world, and, you worked in a front office, right? I mean, you're working for the Nets and you're looking over these sorts of things. In a perfect world, you would like for your top 3 players to make at most what percentage of your overall cap hit?
Yeah, I think that your first two guys, if you're, certainly 30%, 35, 30, and then 25, those are kind of your three tiers there. And you've got two at 30% with Halliburton and Siakam. I think it's hard to have a third guy making 30%. I really do. So then it comes to, from a percentage or from a salary slot, your third guy, you probably want to be in that $20 million range, $19 to $20 million range. And then basically kind of your bench built out with former first round picks, guys making $10 to $12 million. I just think it makes it three max guys is extremely, extremely difficult. I think it's doable if you have draft picks and you can build out. I think Boston, it's doable for right now because they've got basically all their first round picks. But when you become so top heavy with three max guys in this day and age with this new collective bargaining agreement and how the rules are and how punitive they are, it really makes it you better really like your roster. It really makes it hard to add outside of your own players.
So if you look at it, the Pacers would right now, as it stands, have, once these kick in, it would be 75% between Halliburton, Siakam, 30% each, and then 15 for Turner. So that you're saying that's actually a pretty good ratio, right?
No, listen, we wrote about it in January, I think after the Siakam trade. A lot of teams had pointed to Indiana as kind of the blueprint as far as how rosters should be built under this new collective bargaining agreement. Now, the question will be, when Miles becomes free, what's the cost to keep Miles Turner, who's on an expiring contract? Are you comfortable doing that? Can you, is there maybe more inexpensive? That's where you kind of run into if Turner's at $30 million, can you afford to bring him back compared to where he is at $18-19 million? That's for another day here. But no, where they are right now, as far as where they are with their finances and how their roster is set, I think that's the way that teams have to be built moving forward.
From the Miles Turner angle of that, Bobby Marks is our guest, ESPN front office insider on the CarX Tire and Auto guest line. When you look at Miles Turner, and let's say he is a unrestricted free agent next season, what do you see from him at age 29 at that point? What do you imagine he would command at the open market? And at what point, if you're the Pacers, do you have to take a good hard look in the mirror and realize if suddenly 15, 17, 20% of your cap is worth it for a player that would be at that point approaching the wrong side of 30?
Yeah, and the challenge is that he's not extension eligible. So you kind of have to get a good sense kind of what the ability to keep him is. And I think that's probably a decision you can probably make closer to the trade deadline. And you certainly, where your roster factors in, where you are in the standings, you're not going to, if you're in the top three, it's hard to just because he's on an expiring contract. I think the challenge for Indiana for next offseason is that there's going to be an increase in the salary cap, likely 10%. So we go from 141 to 155. And that basically, instead of 5 teams having cap space, now we might have 15 teams. So the market certainly opens up more. This year it's basically almost staying flat here. And that's the risk. That's the risk that Indiana will go through as far as there's more teams available to go out and offer him, $20 million plus. If he was a free agent this offseason, there's certainly more of a comfort level just because of the inability for teams to go out and offer him a big deal.
How does their flexibility going into free agency change both if they did or did not retain Obi Toppin?
Yeah, so right now we've got him at a luxury tax threshold is at 171, including Obi's qualifying offer. Indiana's right at 164. So, what's his next number? Is it, is it 13? Is it $14 million? So you're looking probably right at the luxury tax if you retain him. As far as, it helps certainly if Jalen Smith declines his, $5 million player option. That opens up some more money, as far as him give you some more flexibility. So you're basically looking at, you got 3 seconds. So, maybe one of those are two-way. Maybe those are two guys that you can develop end of the bench here. So I think that's kind of, the restricted free agency of Toppin, your draft, your draft picks here. It's hard to say, it's probably unlikely to use one of your exceptions, which is probably the $5.2 million tax mid-level exception here. So I think a lot of it will do, as I said, what happens with Jalen as far as with that $5 million number, because that does open up a little bit more flexibility.
And the vet minimum about $2 million? Is that where that's at nowadays?
2-1. Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Hey, Bobby, let me give you a quick one here. I'm going to take Jarris Walker out of this equation because I'm going to grade him as incomplete, right? Because we just kind of don't know yet. But amongst these guys, and I'm going to give you 6 names: Nembhard, Neesmith, Ben Shepherd, Benedict Mathurin, Isaiah Jackson, Obi Toppin. All of those guys have played really well for Indiana in different times and in different ways. But if you had to kind of spitball it, which of those two do you feel like would be the most easily interchangeable with someone else in the league if you had to let them walk?
That's a good question. Probably Isaiah. I mean, just because of his position as far as maybe finding another big on the open mark. I think Mathurin would be really hard, and people forget. You guys have talked about it, I'm sure, but you didn't have him for most of the year, and
I know
playoffs, and I think people forget how good he is, and I think that's kind of like the X factor here for this team. To take another step, it's going to be a lot on the development of Mathurin and where he's health wise. I would think he would be really hard to let go. I think Nembhard would be too, just because of his ability to interchangeable positions here at the point and at the 2. You're right. Walker is kind of an incomplete. Neesmith is interesting because it's kind of like that perimeter defender that teams lack, that teams are looking for here. So probably the one guy would probably be Jackson.
The when it comes to Mathurin, and I want you to tell me, Bobby Marks, if this is like way overthinking it. I think Mathurin's a wonderful player. I think we have seen where he can be at times the best player on the floor for them. He has been that at times. But what I haven't seen and what gives me a little bit of pause is Benedict Mathurin being that kind of a player with this particular group since the time that it has gelled together and hit the stride that it's hit. And does that all of a sudden become like this, round peg, square hole? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
is that a legitimate concern?
Yeah. No, I don't know about a concern, but I do think I would have loved to see Mathurin in playoff games, right? I would have loved to see him in that New York series. I would have loved to see him play against Boston because the stakes have changed a little bit, right? As far as you went from a team that was a lottery team, the games didn't, I don't want to say matter, but you weren't playing winning basketball last year where there was, consequences there. So you go from a lottery team to a conference finals team, and he wasn't part of this conference finals team. He wasn't part of this deep run here. So he doesn't have the playoff experience that, Nembhard has or Neesmith or one of those 2 players. So that's, I don't know. As I said, it's not really, it's a concern, but it's the great unknown. It's the great unknown as far as how he integrates on a team that's going to be, predicted to be top 4 in the Eastern Conference next year.
ESPN NBA front office insider Bobby Marks is our guest. He joined us on the CarX Tire and Auto guest line. Bobby, I don't think this is going to be the case, but if they're wrong on Benedict Mathurin, if he is a miss and doesn't pan out to be the player that they drafted him to be, they expect him to be, when you look at their books and you look at this championship window of Siakam and Halliburton, how much trouble are they in as a contender if they're wrong on Mathurin?
You can't miss on draft picks. That's the one thing you can't do if you're paying 2 guys max contracts. You cannot miss on draft picks. You can miss on one of them, but if you've built your bench with 5 or 6 former first and second round players, it's almost like drafting a QB. It's like, you can't miss on these guys here because then it's all of a sudden now we're playing the minimum game, and it's the inability to kind of build out a bench or have that third star. Maybe you lose Turner here. So, yeah, that's the one thing that you cannot do is miss on first round guys. Even in the second round, you can't miss out on the draft.
Bobby, we appreciate it. I know it's a busy time heading into the draft. We might have to have you on around that time to break down Zach Edey and Khalil Ware and whoever the Pacers get and everything else. I basically just committed you to it, whether you are free or not. No,
I don't know if they'll be at 39. I think 39, right? That's where they are. I don't know if those 2 will be at 39.
Well, those 2 won't be. I think those 2 you're looking at, I meant that as 3 different points, I guess, right? I see Ware and Edey kind of being in that same range, like in the 12 to 20 range probably, and then
how about I'll make a deal with you. How about you have me on that Thursday before the second round when Indiana's got if they're still at 3, they still have those 3 second-round picks.
Bobby,
that'll work.
How hard would it be to buy a first-round pick, a late first-round pick?
picks are never sold. I think the last time a pick was sold was Gobert, and I don't even know when that was. Now it's for like $3 million. And I think Tim Connolly, who sold it at the time, would regret doing so. So yeah, teams are very reluctant to sell picks as far as for cash. Trading it is a different story, but buying it, sending $6 million for cash, that we don't really see that much.
All right, the eve of the Pacers selection in round 2, we've got you slotted right now, 12:28 p.m.
Sounds good, guys.
I appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, again, CarX Tire and Auto Guest Line. Bobby Marks joining us. Good stuff. It's interesting between that Nembhard, Neesmith, Shepard, Matherin, Jackson, Toppin, those guys that I mentioned. One of those guys, and I don't know which it would be, Jimmy, but one of those guys, realistically, when you look at it, has been a really good player, but yet
He said the player I think it's going to be.
Well, but I said 2 of them. One of them also, and I don't know which it is, but there is one of those that probably it was situational, that they played really well, and the reality is that there are others that if you went out and maybe even at a lesser price, you could get the same level of production from. I don't know which of those. Maybe it's Shepard. I don't know. Interesting stuff for sure. By the way, Stephen Holder, another from ESPN, he joins us in 12 minutes.
The July 4th sale is on at Sundown Gardens in Westfield. 20% off trees and shrubs through July 3rd. 186th Street and Spring Mill Road, sundown.gardens.com.
Remarkable change begins with daring to be different. Baby, I'm on a mission with Boost Mobile, putting the latest phones in the hands of more people. Introducing the signature Coach Prime Razor, only from Boost Mobile. Rush to your nearest Boost Mobile retailer and get your signature Coach Prime Razor on us. Get after it.
When you switch in with ID verification, select plans only. Offer valid 4/19/24 through 5/23/24. While supplies last. Taxes extra. New customers only. Must remain active and in good standing on the $60 a month plan for 6 months to receive all credits. Offer subject to change.
Roto-Rooter.
Plumbing problem? No match for a little DIY duct tape. Shoot, hold on. Nope. There we go. No match for a little... dang it, wait. Duct tape and a wrench. Leaks are no match for duct tape and a wrench. And a bucket and a towel, more duct tape, a hammer, this random tool I found in the basement, another bucket, more tape, a little more tape. Perfect. On second thought, maybe leave plumbing to the pros at Roto-Rooter.
And away go troubles down the drain.
The IRS is the most powerful collection agency on earth. And if you owe back taxes, the news isn't good. The IRS has raised the interest rate it charges on unpaid taxes in recent years. This hits hard if you're behind on your taxes. Most people don't know it, but the IRS adds interest charges to your tax debts daily. If you owe the IRS today, you'll owe even more tomorrow. And it doesn't stop until you get right with the IRS. The good news is, getting right can start with one phone call to Optima Tax Relief, America's #1 tax relief firm. Optima's tax professionals specialize in the Fresh Start Initiative, a powerful IRS program that can save you thousands if you qualify. A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, the experts at Optima have resolved over $1 billion in tax debt for their clients. Call now for a free consultation.
Call 800-354-2840. 800-354-2840.
So, are you ready for one of my obsessions, Jimmy?
Always, Jake.
I mentioned this briefly the other day on the radio. When we were walking, and I talked, and we've gone over, what I think this swimming trials thing, what it's going to do for the city of Indianapolis, and I love it. It was great. It was fun to be down there. It was very cool. But walking along Georgia Street, I saw, the front of the Pan Am building, and the Pan Am Plaza to the side of it was where, during the Pan American Games in 1987, all of the flags were there for all of the Latin American countries that were represented in the Pan American Games. And that was the center hub of the pin trading, and that really was just kind of ground zero, for lack of a better phrase, for all of the activity of the Pan American Games and the excitement and all of it. No matter what venue, and everybody in this town in some way, shape, or form was involved in the Pan Am Games, whether they were working as a volunteer or taking tickets or, whatever it might have been. It truly was a magical time, and it was the first time that in this city, the city of Indianapolis finally took off its headgear and its acne had gone away, because we were no longer an awkward teenage city. We blossomed into adulthood and had gone through puberty, and that was our introduction to the world, that sports was what was going to catapult us into the next tier of cities and separate us from the Louisvilles and Omahas and introduce us in with the Milwaukees and Minneapolises and, Atlantas of the world. And the part of the Pan American Games was the run of the torch, like any Olympics games, where they have the eternal flame of the torch that is lit, that is to symbolize and embody the human spirit that is burning throughout the Olympics, of people all putting their differences aside to come together collectively through sports, which is what Indianapolis as a city identifies itself as. The once amateur sports capital of the world, and now the sports capital of the world, where all-star games and Super Bowls and everything else take place. The cauldron, the cement, if you will, holder of that torch, where that torch was lit on Georgia Street right in front of the Pan American Games, has been there forever, and it has a marker symbolizing what it represents. And I understand that progress is part of the continued maturation of a city and as a people. I get that. And I'm very excited that a huge hotel is going up right next to the Pan American headquarters that will further facilitate and embody and allow the growth of this city. But unless I'm wrong, and I could be wrong on this, the whole thing is fenced off, but from what I could tell, the area where the cauldron was is part of what has been leveled now to make way for this hotel. That hotel isn't even needed if not for the baby steps that took place in this town, noted by the Pan American Games. That cauldron, and maybe I'm the only person in Indianapolis that feels this way, I don't know, but that cauldron is, more than anything else in this town, representative of the cementing of the arrival of Indianapolis, of the city that we know. And in addition to that, it is representative of people of different creeds, different cultures, different languages, all coming together and converging and feeling comfortable in doing so in Indianapolis, Indiana, to showcase for the rest of the world what they have to offer. That cauldron, 100% more than anything else probably in this city, needs to still be there as a reminder for years to come for people of the fact that the flame may not still be burning, but it's called an eternal flame because of its representation should never go away. And I can't tell you how disappointed it makes me if for some reason, and maybe I'm speaking out of school, maybe somebody's like, Jake, you're an idiot. It's right behind a tarp and you didn't see it. That might be the case. And maybe I'm the only person that thinks about those kinds of things. But you've walked by it 100 times and not necessarily stopped to look to see what it is. But once you see what it is, you're like, I get it. And anybody who was alive in 1987 when the Pan Am Games are going on and hearing my voice is saying to themselves, I totally get it. I remember exactly what that meant for this town, and we should never forget it because it's what enabled Final Fours and Super Bowls and All-Star games and U.S. swimming and everything else. It all began at that cauldron. And the greatest representation of the growth of this city would be a new hotel behind it, but because of the symbolism of what should be sitting right in front of it, letting the world know who we are and where we came from. As simple as that. Stephen Holder next.
A slow network is no network.
Clock hour underway in Indianapolis. For that matter, it's underway everywhere in the Eastern time zone. My name is Jake Query. Jimmy Cook, Eddie Garrison here as well. It's Query & Company on the Fan. Joining us now on the CarX Tire and Auto Guest line, Stephen Holder, who this time of year is a traveling man. Just got back from, I believe, Nashville. I don't know if that's because you were hanging out on Broadway and dodging 10,000 bachelorette parties, or if there was football business to be had, Stephen, from ESPN.com. Enlighten us on what took you to Music City.
Well, as enticing as the 10,000 bachelorette parties sounds, it was not that, sadly. I went down for, if you're familiar with this, Tight End University, Tight End U, as they call it, which is basically a gathering of tight ends for kind of like a sort of a clinic/social event that was started by George Kittle and Greg Olson a few years ago. It's now in its fourth year. So they were at Vanderbilt University this week and kind of let me have a little peek at what they do. It's a pretty cool thing, I got to say. They got 70-some odd participants this year. That's tight ends from across the league, a few quarterbacks, including Dak Prescott, and our old friend Matt Hasselbeck, who's hanging out in Nashville these days. So caught up with, and so Dallas Clark, by the way, came through and participated in the workouts and coached up some guys. So it was pretty cool. I got to say, Travis Kelce obviously was there and did Travis Kelce things, which is, being famous and taking lots of pictures with people. So yeah, it was pretty good, pretty cool overall. And I'll have a story on that. And then it also will be a part of a bigger project that I'm working on. That's a long.
So was Dallas Clark the lone Colts representation?
Yeah, there were no current Colts there. I wasn't sure if that would be the case, but I didn't see any current Colts. But let me tell you about Dallas Clark, first of all. Dallas Clark is in amazing shape, okay? Like, amazing. He did the workouts with the guys, okay? Dallas Clark has been retired, for a little while now. I don't remember exactly how old he is, but Dallas looks amazing. And it's funny because Matt Hasselbeck was also in town. So Tim Hasselbeck lived in Nashville, his brother. So Matt's nephews play high school football down there. So he's been helping out, coaching the kids and stuff. So he came over and helped participate as one of the quarterbacks throwing to the guys. So here you have Dallas, one former Colt on one side, just in impeccable shape. And then you have Matt, who's coming out there, and he says to me, hey, don't tell anybody, but I have no idea how I'm going to throw this ball today. I haven't thrown a ball in forever. And so he was like, I'm completely out of shape. I'm not ready for this. And so you had just the two competing factions of former Colts there, which was pretty hilarious. So, but yeah, it was a good time, man, and got to catch up with a lot of those guys.
Was this a bucket list assignment for you? Because as you mentioned, since Olsen, Kelce, and Kittle started this thing, I think 3 years ago, it has only grown in popularity. They're obviously all big proponents of National Tight End Day, whenever it appears on the NFL schedule. Was this particular assignment, Stephen, a bucket list offseason thing just to see what's going on with those crazies, Stephen, or was it assigned to you?
I'm going to interject here and say this, Stephen. If I find out that your bucket list was to go watch guys work out in tight end workouts, then you and I are no longer friends.
I'm sure there's longer and more exciting
professional
items
goals,
on the
sure.
bucket
list item.
I'm sure there's bigger events.
Stephen, you won the Powerball. Do you and the wife want to go to Tahiti? Well, no. At this point, why not? I've already gone to tight end U. What the hell? It's all gravy.
I mean, I don't know. I think when I was born, my parents looked at me and said, one day this kid's at university. So I feel my parents' ultimate fantasy, which is great.
Who wouldn't want that for their child, right? To get to go to tight end U. I mean, I get it. Sure.
Exactly. I mean, they had free Gatorade. I mean, it was awesome.
All right, let me rephrase. Did you get assigned this, or did you want to go cover it? Let me rephrase that.
Yeah, so it was not my idea. Actually, it was just the non-Colts stuff that I do. Sometimes it gets assigned to me. Sometimes I come up with great ideas. But anyhow, we have been talking about what's the role of the tight end today, in football generally, and how it's evolved, how it's changed, and it's pretty remarkable, right? I mean, I'll dig into this in a much more deeper fashion as we get closer to the season for this project that I'm doing. But one of the things that I think one of the conversations, I guess, that I had there, and this is why I went, right, was to have these conversations and to get the feedback from these guys. Like, you are playing tight end at a point in time that is probably the greatest era for your position, and as Greg Olson told me, he said, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, you had, 4 or 5 teams that had a tight end that would keep you up at night and that you'd have the game plan for, that you worried about. He's like, now everybody has one because the position has been so much more integrated into the pro game. So I thought it was a really interesting point, and these guys are really leaning into that. I talked to Travis Kelce about this, and Kelce, it's really important to him to have been part of this era that has propelled tight ends, into a new realm. Like, he's very proud of that, and I don't think it's too, I don't think it's going too far. I think to say that he has had a big hand in that, right? I mean, he's going to go down certainly, I think, as a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's going to be a guy who is synonymous with a dynasty in Kansas City, and so I think Gronkowski, I think, was certainly a huge part of that, and Kelce has been the next iteration of that. So, we're talking about a guy who is one of the biggest stars in the NFL, and he plays a position that 20 years ago no one wanted to play, frankly. So I think there's been definitely a huge shift.
Steven, do the Colts have currently on their roster, I think we've talked about this, but they're interesting to me at the tight end room because there's not a lot of drop-off, 1 to 4, but there's not a lot of variation of style either. Do they have truly one of the flex tight ends currently on the roster?
Yeah, I mean, I think their hope is that it's Jelani Woods, and I think there's a chance that they're right about that. But really, right now, what we're talking about is a projection, and that's where it's tricky. They have if you have Travis Kelce, like, okay, let's put it this way, right? If you have a Travis Kelce, then less is more. I don't need 5 tight ends who are maybes. I need Travis Kelce, and then we'll find another guy or two who can block somebody. I mean, that's effectively how you would look at it. What the Colts have is, okay, we don't have a dominant tight end. They don't even really have like a guy who's maybe borderline Pro Bowl, right? They don't even have that. So what they have is, we have some young guys with a lot of upside. Now we have to develop them and find out if we get them there. So I think the question is, it's all TBD. And as much as any position, frankly, with the Colts, I think if you look across the board, even in the secondary, as much as people like to beat up on the Colts secondary, you still have Kenny Moore, and you still have Julian Blackmon back there, right? You have 2 of their most experienced defenders, playmakers, guys you don't worry about whatsoever. And now go to the tight end room in Indianapolis, and no one in that room, other than Mo Alley Cox, really has any resume whatsoever, right? And so it's a very unique situation where it's all projection and it's all upside. And frankly, I like Mo Alley Cox, but I think with Mo, we kind of know, all right, we have an understanding of what he is, and I think he has probably, I would say, reached that ceiling, which is fine, right? I mean, he's a guy who can go out there, he can certainly do the dirty work, he can block, he can be a sure-handed guy when you need him to be in certain situations. You can throw him the ball, you can make a play after the catch, but is he a consistent receiving threat who is that flex tight end? No, he's not that, nor does he claim to be. So that guy potentially is Jelani Woods, and we'll see if he can get there.
ESPN Colts beat writer Stephen Holder is our guest, and next bucket wish list item, the John Deere Classic, coming up on July 4th through the 7th. Nice enough to take some time with us. Stephen, where is a fair bar with the Jelani Woods question of it all, where's a fair bar of expectation for him? Because I feel like, and maybe I'm dead wrong on this, I feel like just being on the field for a full season is too low for what they want him to be. Or am I wrong, and that really should be the expectation bar for him going into year 3?
I would agree with that. I think that if he's just out there but not necessarily making a mark, I don't think that's enough. I think if they're going to be a good offense that reaches their potential, the Colts, I mean, overall, right? If they are going to be an offense that reaches their potential, I believe he has to be a part of it, and a part of it that produces more than just, sort of a middling performance. Because I think, when you talk about playmakers and getting the most out of an offense, it really is matchup based. And if you know Shane Steichen, if you know anything about him, that's how he thinks. All right, I can get this guy on that guy, and we can make that play. I can get this player matched up against that linebacker, and that's an advantage for us, right? That's how he thinks. It's all chess. And that's how a lot of coaches think. But he is very much driven by that. It's how he game plans. So in order to make that happen, you have to have as many of those matchup problems as possible, and Jelani Woods has to be one of them. They envision him as being one of them. So now that has to happen. So I would agree with you. I don't think Jelani Woods just kind of being out there and not contributing a lot, I don't think that gets you anywhere. You have to move to the next progression with him, which is to actually become a matchup problem and win those matchups. I think he can, and he's got the right coach. I think he's got a quarterback who will take chances and be aggressive with the football, and they can actually make some downfield plays with Woods. I fully expect that will happen. The question is going to be consistency, and when does he get there? He's still young. He hasn't played a lot, but I'm somewhat bullish on Jelani Woods, and I think if he gets where they think he can go, this offense will add a very important dimension.
Stephen, I've not told you this. Stephen Holder's our guest from ESPN.com. You obviously have met Shannon, several times, and then there was once actually where your wife and I and Shannon, we went to a musical together at Clues and had a good time. She is a corporate travel agent. I think I've told you that. And she was just mentioning to me the other day, she's in the running for some sort of a bonus that they get, and the like prize is that it's a trip for four to Kauai, which is like this fabulous place in Hawaii. And she was asking me, we were making a list of couples that we thought would be fun to accompany should she win this bonus. And it's not easy, but you guys, we had a great time with you and we're friends. I'm taking you off the list now because you've been to tight end U. So just so you know, we are officially, you're off. So thank you. That makes that easy. It's easier for her. I'm sure she's appreciative as well, just so you know.
Well, I'm here to help. Yeah. Listen, I would say, let's be honest. I mean, Kauai would be a disappointment now.
That's right. That's right. I mean, you can't do two bucket lists in the same quarter, right? I mean, who can, come on. Right?
No. I mean, I mean, come on. Where's left? What is left, frankly?
When
so
is enough
right.
Honestly? I mean, just.
Hey, Stephen, one of the things that we have not talked to you about since matter of fact, I don't know that we've talked a lot about it here on the show, but kind of an odd thing I realized to keep an eye on, but you mentioned Dallas Clark. He is going to go into the Ring of Honor. Dwight Freeney is obviously going into the Hall of Fame. Jim Irsay is going to present him. Jim Irsay did post a video of his excitement for the upcoming season and made point out the Dwight Freeney news, which obviously makes that video current. Your thoughts just on the Irsay video and just the overall appearance of his health?
Yeah, I saw it. I was told that video, because I asked, I was told that video was filmed that very day that it was posted. So my observation from it, and I don't mean to take a leap here and get over analytical, but I thought he looked good, frankly, compared to some other times I've seen him when he's maybe not doing so well, to be completely blunt. I thought he looked good for a guy who's been through something. clearly a lot. And at the minimum, we know that he's been through a pretty major back surgery that had him basically off his feet for a long time. And then there's also things that have been reported. We don't have to rehash them, right? We know what they are, which he, kind of sort of denies. But anyhow, he looked good, I thought. And I think really right now, my understanding is the next step and the continued step for the foreseeable future is just continuing to rehab and to get back to full mobility after that surgery that he had. So I fully expect that the next time we really see Jim Irsay make a big grand public appearance, I presume it might just be at the Hall of Fame induction. He still intends to present Dwight Freeney for the Hall of Fame. So I know he's looking forward to that quite a bit. And talked to Dwight last week. He's looking forward to it as well. So, yeah, I definitely hope that everybody's able to get there and participate on the level they hope.
In the dozen or so years that you have covered the Colts, Stephen, entering into it, and there is time between now and then, but entering into camp, is this the camp that actually comes with the fewest question marks?
That's a great question. I think probably, and here's why. Like, I could go back to 2015, where they're coming off of the AFC Championship appearance with Andrew Luck, and they had gone out and had that big offseason, if you remember. It sounds ridiculous now, but let's be honest, right? At the time, there was a lot of hope about what they had done. They had signed Andre Johnson, Frank Gore, Trent Cole, others. And so there was a lot of optimism that offseason. Now, the difference there is that the bar was super high. The bar was like, okay, it's time to make a Super Bowl run. Of course, that never happened. They never even got close. They didn't make the playoffs, right? Andrew Luck got hurt. Lots of other things happened. You were there. We all know. The point is, now they have a lot of upside. They have a lot of reason for optimism. What I'd say, though, is that the expectations are not ridiculous. I think that the expectation is that they get in the playoffs. I think that's where the bar is. But no one's here expecting them or predicting that, the Colts make some sort of Super Bowl run or deep into the playoffs. I don't believe it would be viewed as a disappointment if they don't make a deep playoff run. But they need to get in there, at least be in the conversation. So I think for that reason, a team with some optimism, but not super high expectations, I think it kind of gives you just kind of like, all right, let's just see what we got. Let's see where this goes. And I'm not saying it takes all the pressure off, but I don't think it feels like it has in some other offseason. So I tend to agree with that statement.
ESPN Stephen Holder is our guest. He joined us on the CarX Tire and Auto guest line. Stephen, besides Anthony Richardson, and looking forward to seeing Anthony Richardson on a football field throughout the course of the season and what he means for the Indianapolis Colts, the second most hyped or most excited commodity going into 2024, is that Jonathan Taylor? And if not, who is that?
I was, before you even got his name out, I was thinking Jonathan Taylor. And here's why. I think he is there. So much of their success hinges on him because for this reason, Anthony Richardson's great. Sure. I'm a big believer in his potential, like huge. So you don't have to convince me. Now, I would say this though, Anthony Richardson is going to be a lot different. Is going to be a much different player if Jonathan Taylor's out there in top form. If Jonathan Taylor's playing the way he did at the end of last season, and we all remember that game, the Week 18 game, where he looked like vintage JT in that game. If you put that in the same backfield as Anthony Richardson, well, then anything's possible. So I just think that's such a huge variable that we probably don't talk about enough because, look, the truth is that Taylor has had some injury questions of late. There's no doubt about that. The last 2 years, he went from never missing any time to now, he has had, a couple of prolonged absences and some untimely absences. So there's a question now, and he's got to stay healthy. Now, he came back and he gave him that late season push last year after the hand injury, so it worked out. But he's got to be on the field, I think, for this offense to reach its potential, even with Anthony Richardson. They have to have Jonathan Taylor on the field. I think that is a major and just a massive element for this team that, we just talk about him sort of in these presumptive terms. Oh, yeah, well, JT and Anthony Richardson back there, this is going to be great. And I would agree. But Taylor has to be out there. That's a huge, huge variable. So he's healthy this offseason, and that's a big difference from last season at least.
By the way, Jimmy, you can tell Steven's in the car, right?
Mm-hmm.
I sent him a message last night to confirm that he's coming on today, and he was telling me and this is exciting, coming back, celebrating with the holiday and everything, coming back from a bucket list getaway weekend in Bismarck, right? Another bucket list for Stephen Holder. Just couldn't avoid a couple of days in North Dakota. Stephen, what's in terms of your coverage on ESPN.com and heading into training camp? What's kind of the next thing that you are working on or getting ready to release in terms of your content?
Well, hopefully not much, because I'm headed off on vacation, or at least time off. And then, but certainly I did file today a story on Tight End University. That'll be sort of just a wrap up on the event. More to come later. I also will have a piece in the coming weeks on Dwight Freeney, and certainly timed up with his entry into the Hall of Fame. And what else am I missing? I'll have a couple of Colts pieces here in the coming weeks as well. But I am signing off for a bit, hopefully here. And the other reason I haven't had as much NFL coverage is because I've put on my WNBA hat lately, much more than I ever anticipated, which is fine, by the way. But that has had me splitting some duties here lately, so that's been interesting.
You enjoy it?
As well. I have. I mean, I will tell you, I can't quite explain the Caitlin Clark phenomenon, and I don't mean that in a negative way. What I mean is, like, I would have never guessed that we would have this much of a phenomenon over a women's basketball player. I could never have envisioned that, right? I mean, she's the biggest star currently playing in American sports, I think, at this very, very moment, it feels like, right? But it's always cool to be part of a big story, to be completely honest. I mean, anytime you have that opportunity, it's fun. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I've been in that arena several times this summer, and it feels like a Pacers game.
The one thing to me that still feels weird, though, Stephen, is it feels like to most of the country, Caitlin Clark, still people think of her as Caitlin Clark of Iowa. And it has yet to really sink in that she's actually of the Indiana Fever. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
A little bit, because I think the love affair with her started when she was at Iowa. So that's like the reference point for a lot of people still. And, I guess that makes sense. I mean, she's only played, 11 games or something as a pro. And for 2 to 3 years, she was in our consciousness at Iowa as a phenomenal player. So I guess that's maybe not surprising, but yeah, I would say that's fair. I mean, when I go to the games, I definitely see a lot of Iowa jerseys. There's a ton of them out there in the crowd, right? Her jersey from Iowa. So I think that speaks to what you're saying right there.
All right, on his way to a well-deserved vacation. So, Stephen, enjoy Flint, and then we will talk to you on the other side, all right?
All right, I'll see you guys soon.
Stephen Holder, the bucket, Jimmy, you're never going to live that down.
I heard he's actually going to cover Nathan's hot dog eating contest.
That's right.
It's another beat writer bucket list for himself.
Got to introduce us to the new participants,
yes,
because we know that now. Do we happen to have? And this is typically reserved for Jimmy, but do we have the tinfoil hat music? By the way. I think the Joey Chestnut thing's a publicity stunt.
By both parties or by him? Okay.
I either he is at the last second going to be re-entered, and it's like, oh my gosh, or now that they're doing this pay-per-view with that Kobayashi or whatever, it was all set up ahead of time.
I mean, I'll put on the tinfoil hat with you there.
Okay.
I'll agree with you on that.
You're with me on that?
I am
Eddie,
with you
your
on that.
thoughts?
I'm not there.
Let's go buy more tinfoil.
Not there.
Okay, good.
Saves you money.
We only have 8 feet of tinfoil, so that's good, right? It's getting expensive these days.
It would have been I will say why I'm willing to firmly place the tinfoil hat, assuming my dates aren't wrong here. The Kobayashi Chestnut, whatever, Netflix showdown, live pay-per-views you mentioned, that's in September, right?
Is that what it is?
Like, I thought initially it was going to be on the 4th of July, like they were going to go up against
Correct.
Nathan's.
As did I.
The fact that it's not makes me seem like, maybe there is some truth to the tinfoil there.
I don't know. It just seems. I've heard like conflicting stuff. At first, it was like they're like, no, we didn't ban him. That's he's taking it to the extreme. I don't know. I like Joey Chestnut. He's a good dude. I just
same.
Joey Chestnut's favorite sports team is
the Colts.
I think he likes the teams now because he lives here, right? But he grew up a Golden State Warriors fan. And I think
you had him on many a time in the morning show era, correct?
Yeah, I had him on. I've done a lot of shows with him over the years. Yeah, he's a really nice guy for sure. And he's got I don't know if they still make it, but at one time he had a condiment line.
Yeah, I had some of them,
and they're really good.
They're very good. I don't know if they're still active, but I did have them. They were tasty.
They were very good.
The coney sauce especially was very good.
Coney sauce is good. You're right. If you're just joining us, big news for the Pacers. We will recap that next.
This hour of The Fan is fueled by...
We had Bobby Marks on earlier, the ESPN NBA front office insider, joined us on the CarX Tire and Auto guest line. Of course, you can find that up on our podcast, wherever you get your podcast, but most notably the Podcast Center on 1075thefan.com. And he went in depth on the Pascal Siakam contract extension as the Pacers follow your wish list and get him under the books for just 4 years instead of a 5th year. And as you map out the rest of their team structure, I said this since the second that they drafted the player that I'm about to reference, but one of the last things I asked him was, with Benedict Mathurin, who I think is going to be the key third piece of this group, maybe even the second best player on this team in 2 to 3 years from now, when you're talking about how they're mapping out a path to an NBA Finals appearance and ultimately hoisting the Larry O'Brien trophy. I truly believe that with Benedict Mathurin. He needs to get better in areas, especially on the defensive end, but there were clearly times, even though they made it to the conference finals, where, man, if you had somebody that could win a one-on-one matchup or attack the basket the way that he can, it was missed at times during a highly successful playoff run. That said, though, I asked him, how much trouble are they in if they're wrong about him? Which I, again, don't think they will be. But if they're wrong, and that means they missed. What I mean by that is they drafted him as a top 10 pick, where he was selected. He is supposed to be the next franchise piece. And he said that's exactly what the case is. If they're wrong, they're in trouble, because you cannot afford, regardless of who you are, but especially in this market, you cannot afford to be wrong on any first-round selections, but especially those inside top 10, top 15. Do you see it that same way as I do? That, like, I'm not saying they can't still be a very good team, but if they're wrong there, the course correct would not be through the draft, because they're never going to be in a position to draft that high again during this era.
That's correct.
The course correct probably won't be through free agency, because A, you got to. I love Indianapolis, but you have to sell it to people that weren't here, and B, as Bobby mentioned, you really don't see a ton of big names, at least the last 3 or 4 seasons, go the way of free agency anymore. Usually it's trades, or they extend where they're at, or whatever. So your only avenue to course correct at that point is hoping that you're able to coax up a great deal in the trade market. Do you see it the same way as me, that if they end up being wrong on Mathurin, which I want to stress, I don't think they will be, but if they do, it really harpens what this team could be, more so than the Pascal Siakam contract in a lot of ways?
I think we know. Okay. I was going to offer one of my bad analogies. I won't do that.
I'm always a big fan of those, though. Are you robbing me of a bad one that could be a good one, or are you really not? Don't feel like it pairs.
Okay. In IndyCar racing,
okay,
a couple of years ago, they put on the windscreen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the thing that the clear windshield that goes around to protect the driver from debris. When they did that, it changed the weight balance of the race car, and there are certain drivers that had tons of success and were just absolutely front-line drivers, and then that windscreen was put on, and the car theoretically is the same, but the windscreen changed the balance of it, and there are a couple of drivers that just have not had results since. And it's like, man, the windscreen seemed to the car is the same and the sport is the same, but the way the car needs to be driven is different. We know this driver has talent, but this particular car, it requires a different feel in the way that you drive it. We know that Benedict Mathurin has talent, and we know that Benedict Mathurin can be and has shown to be, at times in games, the best player on the floor. But since the time he got injured, the aerodynamics of the Pacers have changed. They now have the windscreen. They've made an adjustment to it, and everybody else on the roster has been playing with that. And by that, I mean Siakam being there now as the number 2 guy, if you will, and at times number 1 guy. And then Halliburton, the emergence of Nembhard, the emergence of Nesmith. Benedict Mathurin, we know for a fact, is a very good basketball player. But is he a very good basketball player for this new version of the Pacers, or does the balance of the team disrupt the way he plays? That's what we don't know yet, and what we have to determine and have to figure out.
I think from my vantage point, to answer that question, and I liked that one. I did. I thought that was good, by the way, in terms of the analogy as you went in. Does it upset the balance if he is a starter next year? Like, is that the concern? Because ultimately, that's what he has to be if he's going to be the player that he was drafted to be. Anything less than that, for me, And maybe you make the argument, oh, well, he could start out half the year coming off the bench again. And that's fine. But for him to be the player he was drafted to be, doesn't mean he can't have a good NBA career somewhere else. But for him to be the player that they need him to be, it is as a starter in this league. And I don't think this is bold of me to say this, and it's not a knock at Aaron Nesmith or Andrew Nembhard necessarily, but it's one of those two positions he would be bumping out.
You're right.
And
now he could be Benedict Mathurin could be your Vinnie Johnson. Way back, I realize I'm going with here. Vinnie Johnson, the microwave, because he comes in and immediately heats up. There is something to be said for guys that can come off the bench, be your leading scorer for the second unit, and then stay longer than the rest of the second unit on the floor with the first unit and continue scoring at that clip.
Sean Livingston.
Yeah, that's
of the last 10 years. That would be your. I mean, I understand the Warriors were
Richard
different.
Jefferson was kind of that guy at times.
Yep.
Maybe that's what Benedict Mathurin is,
Lou
right?
Williams.
Yeah. I mean, is
Jamal Crawford.
Then I would, and this is probably.
But he's got a little more of a dog mentality in him, though, than those guys.
He does, and you need. Bobby Marks pointed it out. The Pacers roster construction is solid in terms of where the financial breakdown is. Top two guys, about 30-35% of your cap space. Another third guy makes about 15 to 20, and you fill out the rest with nice young pieces while keeping much flexibility as possible with your draft picks. I think that they are, if Benedict Mathurin is a sixth man, if that's what he winds up being, an extended sixth man. So as you mentioned, he's there with the second unit, but then late in crunch time, he is out there with in your 5-man rotation that is there to end a game. It's him, Turner, Siakam, and then Nembhard. Let's say it's Nesmith, the one that's the odd man out there. That could work if we're not going to split hairs necessarily of who's the starter and who isn't. If he is the one that's getting the big minutes at the end of the game, but if he's doing that because he's not good enough to be a starter, like if it's not that he's the microwave, the hot hand, it is we don't think he is the guy we thought he was, and he's just a rotation piece. He's not an extended guy late in game minutes. He's just there to fill a hole and play a role. I don't think that both Nesmith and Nembhard combined together in a starting five are enough to contend in the East.
You ever think
truly contend in the East?
You ever think it's weird in a microwave? Have you ever had this thought when you microwave something, and then as soon as it hits stop and you open the door and you put your hand in, it's room temperature, and you're like, that was 1,000 degrees 2 seconds ago.
Yeah.
You ever think about that?
It's popped in before.
And then do you ever think about the fact that
Eddie thinks about that every Tuesday?
I mean, that's got to be like some sort of like Chernobyl radiation going through there, right?
Sure.
And then you're eating that. Is that good, you think?
Well, there are people, and that is high-level tinfoil hat territory, that would tell you that you shouldn't eat anything out of a microwave.
Really?
But, I mean, like, some people are very anti-reheating.
Do you ever eat those healthy choice? Those things that you peel the little thing, and then the cobbler part's scorching because you forgot to open up the vent all the way? You know what I'm talking about?
I've done it. I've had that same thing with a Hot Pocket happen before.
How about microwave popcorn? You ever leave it like that 1 second too long?
Yes.
All hell breaks loose and everybody's mad because you can smell it everywhere.
And then everyone on the fourth floor smells it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, of course, this goes without saying, and it's a cliched like stand-up comic bit, but like, do not be the person that does any sort of reheating of fish in the microwave in an office place.
Don't do that.
Not a good. No. Same with an airplane, right?
Yes. I just think if they are on the championship trajectory, we think they are, Benedict Mathurin has to be a starting piece. He has to be. We need to be having the same conversations.
But why? Why Mathurin over Nesmith? Why shouldn't? I mean, Nesmith's a better defender.
Personally, I would do it over Nembhard because I think then you move Nembhard more into his natural role with the second unit of being the lead guard.
I like that.
That's fair.
I like that. I just think that I think that the peak of Benedict Mathurin of what he's going to be, he is the. I think his peak is the second best offensive weapon on this team. From a scoring standpoint, I think that's what he is. And I think that's what they think he can be.
Second best. You're talking about for Mathurin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
From a strictly scoring standpoint.
Over who? Siakam?
From an offensive scoring standpoint, I would say over Halliburton.
Okay. So Halliburton's your facilitator.
Yes.
He's your creator. I don't think you could just
Both.
label him.
Yeah, both. Yeah, all around. I mean, he does both. But yes, he is setting. We've seen it, right? He loves to set guys up.
Right.
In that specific definition, I don't want to put
You know,
Halliburton in a box, but that's what he is.
It's kind of like
yes.
my Twitter account, just setting guys up, right?
Exactly.
Guys that respond to me on Twitter and then instantly start getting hot chicks in the bio that they're just looking for somebody to snuggle and watch movies with.
Movie buff.
A movie buff in the buff, right?
I mean, next year, if Matherin takes a leap forward, and we'll say he's an average defender, right? Let's say he's an average defender next year, but he is the full package of scoring that you want him to be. And maybe I'm too close to the edge here. Maybe the rose-colored glasses are a little too strong today. If it is, and I agree with Eddie on this, if it is Halliburton, Matherin, Neesmith, Siakam, Turner with Nembhard off the bench, that's a conference finals team at minimum for me. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's a conference finals team.
I mean,
already,
I know they were this year, but like the questions are
right. Without,
yes,
yeah.
But why are they a conference finals team with him starting over him on the bench? Like, it's all the same if he's playing the same minutes.
Well, my argument to that is that the mental side of things and egos play a big role in this league. And you're right, the minutes might end up the same, but he wasn't drafted to just be a sixth man off the bench. He was drafted to be a starter in the league. And you're right. In theory, if you can set aside, and I'm not saying that this matters to Matherin, but I know we joke about, Jake, your best trait being, how humble you are.
That's right.
I will wear that hat for a second and borrow it for just a second. If it was me and I was entering, my third season in the league, I would want to be a starter because it's where I was drafted to be. Even if you're telling me, the minutes are the same, it's all the same. No, I want to be an NBA starter on a championship team. And I think he's good enough to do that.
What sweater are you wearing today?
We're wearing a Scotland jersey today.
Happy birthday, Mr. Matherin, by the way.
Happy birthday to my dad, too, by the way.
Ooh, that's fun.
Really?
Today is my dad's birthday.
So,
yes, indeed.
You let it off the show that it was your mom's birthday, but you don't leave it off the show with your dad's birthday?
That's a good point.
Let's see where he ranks.
Well, given his baseball card fascination, I'm sure Willie Mays would be above his birthday in some regards.
That's the thing. There was so much going on at the top of the show between Siakam and Willie Mays. But yes, today is my dad's 59th birthday.
Happy birthday, Mr. Query.
That's right. Lloyd Query. My buddy Mike Hillary, we were in college, said, "Hey, Lloyd." My dad said, "It's Mr. Query, and you just bought yourself 10 more years of calling me that." So if you see him, if you're out looking for your cat and you run into my dad, call him Mr. Query.
You get the mental side of that, though.
I do.
Like, it's not. It happens in every walk of life. Some people that are trying to walk the ranks of a business, like, what's the difference between you being an assistant general manager and a general manager? Well, the title itself,
and what
the praise, the accolades.
There is a lot
of
truth, Jimmy. You are correct in this. There is a lot of truth to how you are established at the outset of your employment somewhere goes a long way in just the label that you are always going to be in.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people a lot. One of the hardest things to do is to work a place that you interned, because you'll never get rid of the label of the intern. Yeah, Channel 6, God love them, and I'm always thankful for the opportunity there, and I have great friends, great memories, all of it. Nothing but good things to say. But I was 33 years old working at WRTV, and people are like, now you're the intern, right? No, that was 14 years ago. You know what I mean? Because the way you enter oftentimes is the way you're labeled forever. It's just the way it goes.
Did you ever just attribute it, though, to you retaining your figure and your devil may care nature about you?
My level of maturity probably did not change. It was a bit, shall we call it, stunted. Yeah. Why are you wearing the Scottish kit?
So
there's always a symbolism with everything you wear.
So they play today. There's always some type of symbolism. My family has Irish roots. There's no Scottish roots here, and I wanted to root for a average team in the Euros. And since Ireland's not there, I was just looking online, what's the closest thing? And there are a lot of Ireland fans that are supporting Scotland just because they're not there. So I figured, what the heck? I spent $12 on eBay.
Have you seen Trainspotting?
Have not. Seen Braveheart. Does that do anything for you?
That's good. Same setting. Yeah, Trainspotting needs to be subtitled because they have the Scottish accent, and it's really hard to understand. But good movie, I guess. Although Trainspotting is largely about a group of kids in Scotland, young adults, and a lot of heroin use. Mm. And when I saw the movie, I went. This was when it was out 30 years ago, whatever. And there was a high school kid working at the theater, And he's tearing my ticket, and he goes, "You're seeing Train Spotting?" He goes, "Dude, it's awesome. Afterwards, all you're going to want to do is sit around and smoke cigarettes and shoot up." I'm like, whoa. I don't think that's really the moral lesson they're going for. Somebody dies in it. But, yeah, okay, sure. Whatever floats your boat, right?
Do you think the same thing happened for people with Wolf of Wall Street?
Yeah, exactly.
Man. All you gotta want to do is go.
You just want to sit around with Matthew McConaughey and bounce on your chest after a slight toot.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, come on, really? That's what you took from that?
Royal Spa hot tubs are simply better.
You ready for a quick full circle story time, Jimmy?
Yes. Give it to me.
Thank you, Eddie. So once upon a time in IndyCar racing, there was a driver named actually it's pronounced Awiston Canapino, still with Juncos Hollinger Racing. But last year he had a teammate.
Should I get the merry-go-round music going here?
Pretty much. You probably know where this is all going, right?
Oh, yeah.
So 5-second nutshell. Awiston Canapino is an Argentinian driver, very, very popular in Argentina. Last year his teammate was Callum Ilott. Callum Ilott and Canapino had some words, and as a result of that, a lot of the Argentinian racing fans took to the interwebs to basically mock and make life difficult for Callum Ilott. Callum Ilott then became very vociferous with the fact that he didn't appreciate that, and there was a problem here, and yada, yada, yada. So eventually, Callum Ilott left the team and kind of became a free agent driver. Meanwhile, Arrow McLaren had a car, that would be car number 6, that had been vacated by Felix Rosenquist that left to go to Meyershank Racing, and they decided to hire a young guy by the name of David Malukas. But David Malukas got injured, and so as a result, they hired Callum Ilott to drive the number 6 car while David Malukas recovered from his injuries. Callum Ilott, who, of course, as a teammate of Juncos Hollinger Racing's Agustin Canapino had gotten sideways with many of the Argentinian fans. Calum Eilert had other commitments and couldn't race all of the races in the number 6 car. So eventually, Arrow McLaren also hired another fellow by the name of Teo Porcher to do that in the number 6 car that had been vacated by David Malukas with his injury, and Calum Eilert had been filling in, but Eilert wasn't able to do every race. So Porcher is racing in Detroit, gets into an altercation on the track with Agustin Canapino, and as a result, the Argentinian fans get upset with Teo Porcher and start sending him emails, and a firestorm ensues. So Canapino decides to sit out the following race. As a result, they hired Nolan Siegel to drive Canapino's car. Nolan Siegel does very well, is very impressive. Arrow McLaren decides that David Malukas has broken his contract by not being available, so they actually fire him, and he goes and signs a new deal to drive with Meyer Shank Racing, who had an availability, and he becomes teammates with Felix Rosenquist, who had vacated the number 6 car the year before, thus allowing David Malukas to take over the number 6 car. But David Malukas and Felix Rosenquist both are now out of the 6 car and teammates at Meyer Shank Racing. But the number 6 car has availability. It's being split by Teo Porcher and Calum Eilert, both of which had gotten sideways with Agustin Canapino's fans. But because Nolan Siegel filled in for Agustin Canapino and was very impressive, Arrow McLaren decided they wanted to hire him full-time, so they hired him to drive the number 6 car instead of Teo Porcher and Calum Eilert.
There will be a quiz later, Jimmy. Hope you got all that.
Did you get all that?
Yeah, it's going to be a fail for me, but it was a good story.
Thank you. That's how we play as the world turns in IndyCar.
Silly season, right?
Silly season and like, like silliest, right? And it's not even silly season yet. That's the best part about it, right?
Now, I thought McLaren let David Malukas go because of the wrist injury that he sustained like a week before the season started, and they had to let him go because of that. I didn't realize it was something else.
No, that's what I said. Malukas was unavailable due to injury to drive the car, and thus he had in his contract that if he was not able to drive so many races that he voided the contract. So they determined that the contract was voided. So they got rid of him. He left the 6 car and went to Meyer Shank Racing once he was healthy.
Now, wasn't Nolan Siegel a part of the Le Mans race?
Yes, Nolan Siegel won the 24-hour Le Mans. That is correct.
That would have had to have been something that they put in the contract, not that he would have put in the contract, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So, yeah, Maluka, it's kind of like when I was talking about with Anthony Richardson, and I know it sounds crazy, but when Richardson got a tattoo and was sedated for it, and I was saying I'm surprised that wasn't in the contract, that kind of a thing wasn't covered. I mean, that's probably pretty esoteric, but I do think that a lot of sports contracts say, like, you can't go snowboarding or you can't go skydiving or whatever else. Malukas' contract had something in there. I don't know that it said he can't go riding a bike, but it said if for any reason you are unavailable because of a reason outside of racing to be in X number of races, then you void the contract. And he was in an accident on a bicycle that caused a wrist injury or a hand injury that prohibited him from racing in the minimum number of races, thus allowing McLaren, if they so chose, to void the contract, which they exercised that option. And then very shortly thereafter, he was healthy, and so Meyer Shank hired him. And he is teammates now with Felix Rosenquist. That seat became available because Tom Blomqvist, no relation to Felix Rosenquist, even though both of them would like to trade the V for a U in their last name, Felix Rosenquist had Tom Blomqvist as a teammate. Blomqvist had an incident in the Indy 500. He was replaced by Elio Castroneves until they could get David Malukas into the car. In fact, quiz later.
The Ride with JMV.
That's a really nice jacket. By the way, speaking of the Stanley Cup Finals, you just heard that mentioned on this radio station where you can hear it. It is now 3-2. And the good news is that the streak is alive for the Edmonton Oilers of chicks flashing in the crowd. Another one yesterday. It's becoming a trend.
Wait, there was another one?
Oh, yeah.
It's a rally flash at this point?
I take back everything I've said about the city of Edmonton.
Did not see that one.
Where I once flew 6 hours and landed and was at 25th and Shadeland for a weekend in Edmonton, Alberta. It was the weirdest thing ever. It was like literally like the Edmonton Oilers' heyday was the mid-'80s, and so too was that city, and everybody there is walking around in acid jeans and Reebok high tops and mullets. Neon everywhere. It was the most bizarre place ever. But all kinds of women in the crowd are flashing, so it's like, all right, let's go. Although this game was in Florida, so it might have been a Panthers fan, but I believe she was at least paying homage to the Edmonton Oilers. Joining us now, and I'm sure very comfortable with that segue, on the CarX Tire and Auto guest line is Alex Golden, who last night, I believe, Alex, if I'm correct, was it within the last 24 hours that you had a pretty cool interview for the Pacers?
Yeah, and we released it Tuesday morning, but yeah, we had Andrew Nimhart on the podcast. A lot of fun talking with Andrew.
Okay, was there anything that came out from the podcast, I guess, that surprised you, if you will, because he obviously, let's face it, to an extent, he had a surprising year.
Yeah, I would say this. I mean, Andrew is not one that gives long, lengthy answers like a Tyrese Halliburton. He pretty much answers straight to the point and doesn't really say too much, but I thought that him kind of reflecting on some of his teammates and the relationships they've had together, I thought it was interesting him talking about early on in the season, him and McConnell were battling back and forth for that backup position. So to be able to close out some games there against the Celtics together on the court was a really cool moment for him, and just the professionalism that TJ's had. And then, of course, bonding with Pascal Siakam. So he definitely, when you try talking about himself, he didn't say too much. But before we hung up, it wasn't on the podcast. This is the part that was just us talking off air. Basically, we just said, hey, we're big fans of yours, and, we're kind of stands in a certain degree. We go to bat for you quite a bit, and he said, I'm going to continue proving you right. So I think there's a lot of confidence in Andrew Nimhart himself, and I think that's what makes me probably the most excited about his future with this team.
Alex Golden is our guest. I'm on the Setting the Pace podcast. Alex, our debate the last week or so has been, should there be fear, should there be anxiety if the Pacers were to extend Pascal Siakam to a longer contract? Jake had highlighted how when you get to that fifth year, at times the contract itself across sports, the money doesn't age well because the player is, past their peak or past their prime, and it can be a risky game. That's a moot point for the Pacers. They come to terms with what looks to be a 4-year, $189.5 million contract extension. Your initial reaction, I know you've shared it already on Twitter at Alex Golden NBA, and of course, I'm sure we'll talk about it additionally on Setting the Pace, but your reaction now that piece has been set in stone.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of fear from people about the 5-year max extension, saying he wasn't worth that. But I think people always forgot that no other team can offer him more than 4 years. So Indiana always had the leverage play of saying, hey, let's do a 4-year deal, and they can still offer him more money. So he wasn't going to be able to get more money elsewhere. So it does make a lot of sense. When I saw that it was 4 years for $189.5, I was not surprised that that's what they came to an agreement on. And I think it's actually a great contract for both sides. I do think it's a little interesting that there is no player option in the final year of that contract. So that does give Indiana a little bit more leverage there in terms of what they can do with that contract. But it's great for Pascal Siakam to get the money that he has deserved. I thought he played really well last year for Indiana, and it didn't seem like Toronto was going to give him this money. So I know that it's a heavy amount of money. I've already had people stop me at work saying, can you believe how much he's making? And I said, yeah, it's just kind of the new era of the NBA. $47 million per year on average is pretty crazy, but it's kind of the norm. So I thought that it was a great job by the Pacers to make sure that it didn't go into 5 years, because I do think that by the end of this contract, he could be tailing off in terms of his overall production. And the closer they can get that to an expiring, that becomes a more valuable trade asset once it becomes an expiring contract if a team is wanting to, make a trade in a couple of years for somebody like Pascal.
Would you anticipate, Alex, that Andrew Nimhart is the next that goes to the negotiating table with Indiana?
That's a great question. We did ask Nembhard. I asked Nembhard about the contract extension, and he refused to talk about it, which I understand. So I think that it could make sense for Nembhard to try to get a deal done this offseason. I think he can get somewhere around $17 million is where I read. So if he can get that, that'd be great. But I also wonder if maybe he kicks the can down the road a little bit and says, you know what, I'm going to hit restricted free agency next summer. And maybe there's a team out there that could offer him a starting point guard position to get more money. So I think if I'm Nembhard, I'm definitely listening to the offers Indiana throws at me. And if I'm Indiana, I'm trying to get the deal done sooner rather than later because I don't want to have to see him potentially walk in free agency or have to overpay a lot to keep him and not be able to really afford him with the tax and things like that. So I definitely think they'll be looking to do that. But I would also keep an eye on T.J. McConnell getting an extension as well. Won't be nearly as high of money as a Nembhard could be, but I think that McConnell could be somebody else that is in the talks here for an extension.
How big of a gamble is that, though, for Nembhard? Because you mention it is potentially some guaranteed money, though if he ends up outperforming that contract, if they extend him, then maybe it turns into an Aaron Nesmith situation where, you're locked in, but boy, you could have gotten more had you waited a little bit longer. But the other side of the coin is if he does what you mentioned, which is go ahead and test free agency and see what's there, maybe the money's not right and then he's kind of trapped in no man's land. How much of a gamble would that be realistically for Andrew Nembhard if he decides I'm going to play things out and see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's a pretty big gamble, right? Because I think his stock is probably the highest it's going to be. Next year we'll see what happens, but just being able to showcase what he can do when Tyrese Haliburton was out in the playoffs and perform as well as he did, I think that does have a lot of teams probably intrigued. The real question is, does Andrew feel valued here as the starting two guard? Is that what he's going to be promised moving forward, or is that something he's going to have to continue to earn? And if T.J. McConnell's still on this roster, is McConnell going to continue being the backup point guard? To me, if I'm Nembhard, I'm really looking at it from a long-term perspective because, yeah, I like being on Indiana. I've had success here, but let's say there's an opportunity. Let's just throw out a team like Toronto, somebody like that has cap space in the next year or two, and they can offer him a pretty big contract to be their starting point guard. Would you rather be the starting point guard and kind of have your own team to run, or would you rather stay with Indiana and kind of play second fiddle to Tyrese Haliburton? So that's where I think it could be a little bit interesting, a little bit tricky for that contract. It really all just depends on what Nembhard wants in terms of where he sees himself at in the future of the league. But if I'm Indiana, like I said, I'm definitely trying to give him the deal that I can give him and the right amount of money. But if I'm Nembhard, I do think it's a bit of a risk because what if he gets hurt this year? You always have to wonder about that and doesn't maybe play as well in year three. But the way that we've seen him kind of projecting and moving forward, to me, it feels like I would feel pretty safe betting on myself if I'm Nembhard to prove to people that, hey, I feel like I could be a more valuable starter somewhere else and kind of have my own show to run.
Nesmith, Shepard, Jackson. I'll throw Nembhard in there as well. Of those, the one that actually would have the highest market interest in terms of other teams trying to pluck them away would be which?
Yeah, I think it's Nembhard out of those four. For sure, to me. I just think that what he proved in the playoffs, I know Nesmith had some really good moments in the playoffs too, but Nembhard's just his ability to create for himself a little bit more than Nesmith. His shot has improved drastically. I know he struggled defensively against Jalen Brunson, but you could make the case for the majority of the season he was a better overall, defender on guards than Aaron Nesmith was. So I think that would be the piece that'd be the most intriguing to me out of the four names you gave.
How much of the rest of this offseason has sexiness, has the drive to bring in another veteran piece to maybe make a splashy trade, or is it largely Bennett Matherin's going to be healthy, Siakam's now here, perhaps they retain Obi Toppin? How much of it is status quo now moving forward, and how much of it is, no, there could still be a little bit of splash for the Pacers this offseason?
Yeah, I would lean more towards they probably run it back to a certain degree, right? You might lose to Jalen Smith or somebody like that, but I would be a little bit surprised if they do make a big push right now for a win-now player, just seeing how close they got. I know there was injuries, obviously, that happened with Milwaukee and New York, but just seeing how close they got without Mathurin, without Walker in the rotation. Now, I do think that if they bring Obi Toppin back, it is going to be interesting to see who gets cut out of the rotation because there's probably 11 to 12 guys that could be in the rotation that could play. So that's one thing they might want to look at is maybe a consolidation trade if somebody becomes available that they really think can kind of help them get over the hump. But at the same time, you don't really want to mess up the chemistry that was established last year and the development of this team. I think you guys would agree too, is definitely advanced in terms of where they were expected to be at last year to where they got ultimately by making the Eastern Conference Finals. So, yeah, you could say, you know what, we were pretty close without Mathurin in the rotation. Mathurin might not be the perfect fit with what we're trying to do stylistically. Could we trade him for a guy that makes a little bit of sense and could help us win now? Or is that a little bit of premature thinking and not really thinking long-term because in 2 to 3 years, that player that you traded for could be on a new team and Mathurin would still be under that rookie contract or his extension on that rookie contract and really starting to come into his own. So I think if I'm Indiana, and unless there's a name out there that's just going to drastically change the where this team is going, then I'm not making a splashy move right now.
Alex Golden's our guest. He's on the CarX Tire and Auto guest line. Alex, what do you think the market interest is going to be in Obi Toppin?
That is a great question. The thing is, Obi Toppin played so well last year, but I think part of it is just the fit of this team and what they're doing, playing fast and his ability to shoot the three. He's not going to probably get those same looks on different teams, so I would expect his percentages not to be as high if a team were to go after him. So I think that there's going to be interest just because he is young. He is a former lottery pick that proved, okay, this is what he can really thrive in, maybe as more of a backup power forward. But if I'm Indiana, I feel like I've got the best system overall for what is great for his game. So I think you'll see some teams maybe throw a little bit of money at him. I think he'll have interest from a handful of teams around the league, especially around that mid-level exception type of money, which would be if you're a non-tax-paying team around 12.8. So I think that there could be definitely some offers around that range for him. But if I'm Indiana, I'm making sure that I do not let him walk for nothing because of how valuable he was to this team last year.
Alex Golden, our guest, joining us on the CarX Tire and Auto guest line. All right, Alex, in terms of, this was the big deal with Siakam. We knew that. We anticipated this was going to get done. Now moving into the draft, kind of the other end of the roster, which I think is interesting because with the Pacers having 3 picks, if they decide that there are 3 players they want, they've got decisions to make on that back-end roster stuff because between, Brown, Shibwe, who am I missing that's the third that in terms of G League?
Quentin Jackson. They got him last year.
Okay.
Isaiah Wong.
And Wong as well, right?
Yep.
The two-way deals and the G League contracts that come out, I believe all of those now are people that they've got to determine what takes place. Could we see a complete overhaul on that back end of the roster?
I don't think so. I mean, they might take somebody at 36, but that to me is not even someone that really gets put on a two-way very often. Usually players in that 36 pick range are kind of like your 15th guy. So if they are just completely out on Kendall Brown and feel like the player at 36 could take his spot, then they could do that because I don't believe Kendall Brown's contract is guaranteed, so they could cut him. I don't anticipate Doug McDermott coming back. James Johnson is somebody that I could see them bringing back once again just because they like having that veteran leader. But if Jalen Smith opts out, if they waive Kendall Brown and McDermott's not back, then I definitely think there could be a spot for probably someone around pick 36 to draft. But in terms of your two-way guys, I think Shibwe is going to stay. I think that he was pretty valuable in the G League Rookie of the Year. I think Quentin Jackson, we really didn't get to see a whole lot of him, but they really liked his play, so he can make some sense. Isaiah Wong can make sense. And I don't think there's going to be somebody significant around 49-50 that could really, push for that. I don't think you're really thinking too much about him. So I would be surprised if they take either 49 or 50. I kind of anticipate them maybe trying to trade those picks for future second-round picks later down the road that they can use as assets because to me, they cannot take 3 players in this draft, even if they put 1 or 2 of them on a two-way.
Host of Setting the Pace podcast, he is Alex Golden. He joined us on the CarX Tire and Auto guest line. Alex, how big is the decision they have to make with Obi Toppin? because you have the ability to retain him. Yes, he's a restricted free agent, but you would be, in all accounts, able to do that still from a financial standpoint, despite the lack of flexibility. Even if you were to renounce him and not move on from him, you would still be up against trying to find room to bring in a player outside of the veteran minimum or some of the other exceptions they have. With the financial side of it and also what he has meant to this team in just one season of basketball and the apparent finally finding that perfect role for him at this stage of his career, how tough of a decision is it with Obi Toppin, and ultimately what do you think they wind up doing?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't think it's that tough of a decision for the Pacers. The only thing they really have to weigh is where are we going to get Jarris Walker playing time, and is he more of a 4 or a 3? Because this is your first-round pick from last year that you got the 8th overall pick, and he's a player that was drafted as a 4, but every time Chad Buchanan's been on our podcast, he's talked about him being more and more of a 3. So I kind of think they envision Jarris Walker playing more 3 and Obi being that backup 4 long term. So I don't think that that's really a problem.
Is it tough for him? Is it tough for him if a team comes calling with money?
It just depends on how much money you're talking about, because I think that there's got to be a cap here with Obi Toppin in terms of how much you're willing to give him. I think that 3 for $45 million, so around $15 million a year, is probably the max that I would do if I was Indiana. I don't think he should be getting that much more than that on the open market. I would be kind of surprised if he does. Now, if he does, he's got to take the money. Similar to Bruce Brown, you're going from a championship-level team to the Pacers, and it seems like you're taking a step back in terms of where you're at on the roster, but you're getting guaranteed money that you've never gotten before. So, I mean, money will always talk, but I think if Indiana can find a way to potentially get him around 3 for 45, maybe a little bit less than that, somewhere around that mid-level exception number, which would be around 12 to 13 million. I think that makes kind of sense for where he's at right now in his career. But yeah, I think for Obi and the Pacers, like, it seems like there's a pretty open relationship. They both want each other. Like, Obi wants to be here. The Pacers want to bring him back. I don't think it'll be that difficult for Indiana to say, you know what, let's agree on a deal. But I do think that if it gets past a certain number, Indiana's probably got to look at that tax line and say, we just can't afford to go over this amount of money. So that's where things could get a little tricky. But I doubt it gets there. I just really can't see any team throwing a ton of money at him. And, I mean, I know Philadelphia's got some cap space, and I know that the Pistons have cap space. But to me, it's just like you found something that works so well here. If you can kind of get yourself, just rooted with this group that just had an Eastern Conference Finals run, why wouldn't you want to come back to that, even if it's just a few extra $1 million? I know money talks, like I said, but opportunity talks more, and I think that if he continues to thrive in this role, it's going to have more future money for him, where if he does risk it a little bit and walks in free agency, he might not get that same amount of money on the next contract that he could be looking at.
Alex, you and Jimmy Cook have this in common.
We're both awesome, cool guys. That's what you're going to say?
Let's not push it.
Okay.
This past Sunday was the final time for both of you guys that you will go through a Father's Day without getting gifts, right?
Yeah, no, it's pretty exciting times. Jimmy told me around Mother's Day, I saw it on Facebook, that him and his wife were expecting, and we had knew at that time, me and my wife did, but I didn't want to say anything yet. So was able to announce it this past Sunday that we are expecting in December. So me and Jimmy Cook will be joining the Dad Club, and I'm excited about that.
Due date December 8th, is that right?
No, December 29th is the due date, so just before the year.
Okay, now here's the question. So after a late night of bottle feeding and that kind of thing, you get up in the morning and you're getting ready to do your podcast or do work or whatever else. This is, of course, like a year from now, and you're going to make yourself a bowl of cereal. You going with Golden Crisp, Golden Puffs, or Golden Grams? Which one do you go with?
Oh, you got to go Golden Crisp. Who doesn't like some Golden Crisp? I think those are pretty underrated.
That's the Golden Crisp has that little bear fella, right?
Yes, it's very similar to Honey Smacks.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's a post Kellogg. Are they both? Yeah, Kellogg's Honey Smacks, and then post would be the Golden Crisp. They are basically the same thing. One has a frog, one has a bear. Golden Grams better than both of them. If you're Alex Golden, you should know that Golden Grams is a superior golden cereal.
Yeah, I like Golden Grams. They're good. I'm just a sucker for some Golden Crisp / Honey Smacks. I'll eat either of them. It's a good cereal.
All right, fair enough. Alex, congratulations on
Alex.
the fatherhood and also on the Andrew Nimhard interview, and we appreciate the time today.
No, absolutely, guys. Thank you so much for having me on, and look forward to doing it again soon.
By the way, I don't know if it was the Golden Crisp conversation. There's fleas in here. Do you got fleas over there?
I mean, I've seen gnats or fruit
gnat.
flies.
It's a gnat.
But I don't think fleas is the right term.
Who's bringing in fruit? You know what? It's Eddie. Eddie's always eating in here.
I had a banana.
I don't know that it was Eddie. I feel like it's something that's been sitting in the trash for a minute. By the way, I know why you did it because they're all golden and he's Alex Golden and haha. But I mean, Cinnamon Toast Crunch is the winner there, right? Like if we're comparing Golden Graham, Cinnamon Toast Crunch. That's the way you go, right?
Here's the thing.
It's a taste you can see, Jake.
Cinnamon Toast Crunch is good. But Golden Grahams, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, you more easily hit a wall. With Golden Grahams, you don't.
You mean like mid-bowl, you're like, oh, it's too much. Is that what you mean?
Well, okay, first off, this is a the morning guys used to give me grief about this. I eat cereal out of a moose cup. I don't eat it out of a bowl.
Okay.
Like the big... You guys don't know what a moose cup is, I realize.
I don't, but I...
A large plastic cup.
Yeah, sure. I figured.
Like the 32-ounce fountain drink cup. I put cereal in that. Eddie's not... Eddie, are you with me on this?
No, I'm aware of what you're about to
please tell me it looks
educate Jimmy on.
Please tell me it looks like the Christmas Vacation one. Does it have the antlers or no?
No, it doesn't have that.
All right.
It was back in the day at one of the convenience stores, the moose cup. It was their term for what's...
You got to do it in the old man voice.
Back in my day. I don't know why you guys love my old man voice so much. Back, we'd go and get a moose cup at a 7-Eleven.
Well, longing for the days of classless basketball.
That's right. We'd sit around. I remember watching Siakam and we'd eating in our moose cups. I don't know. I would eat in college. It was a big thing.
Sure, I get it.
Stacks of cup, like a stackable cup.
Judgment-free zone here in the company. That's
but
totally
what
fine.
I'm saying is there are certain cereals that I'm not going to eat just one. I'll use the term bowl. One serving of it.
I get it.
Cinnamon Toast Crunch is one of them that you're just like, okay, when you've hit a wall, you've hit a wall. It's very good. Don't get me wrong.
I understand.
Fruity Pebbles are probably the gold standard.
Oh, yep.
Oh, yeah.
No off switch with Fruity Pebbles.
No.
None.
Keep them coming.
Right?
Yep.
Golden Grahams, though, are great because not only are they also can be eaten like a handful of chips. Raisin Bran the same way. Raisin Bran pretty good.
I love the Cinnamon Life cereal.
Cinnamon Life, not bad. Regular Life, not bad. Then there are other cereals that you're like, what parents are allowing their kids to eat this? Cookie Crisp, for example.
I ate that growing up.
I had a little Cookie Crisp as a kid.
Oreos.
Cookie Crisp, as the ad said.
Your parents didn't give you guys the limit of sugar cereals only one day?
They learned from that quickly. It was a lot of Honey Nut Cheerios after the Cookie Crisp.
Yeah, Honey Nut Cheerios are solid.
Yeah.
Another one that can be eaten kind of dry, right?
Yeah.
Cheerios themselves, okay. What about
I do not care for plain Cheerios. Once you've been introduced to Honey Nut Cheerios as a child, you want nothing to do with regular Cheerios.
What's the cereal that you're like, what psychopaths eat that?
Raisin Bran.
Oh, Raisin Bran's good, man.
It is good.
All right, well.
How about Grape Nuts? Other than putting it in yogurt, who?
Oh, no, I got it.
Who is pouring themselves a bowl of Grape Nuts?
I'll retract Raisin Bran. I always said it because my dad would always have it.
Total? You going with Total?
No, cornflakes.
Again, not bad, but you got to put a little bit of slight sugar on top.
See, but you're modifying it. I'm talking about straight out of the box psychopath.
Okay,
cornflakes is the way I'm going.
Fair.
Because it's always in how they do the variety box of mini cereals?
Oh, yeah, of
and
course.
You're eating that last. You're having your Apple Jacks and your Cinnamon Toast Crunch, your Fruit Loops first.
Jeff Chaney chimes in with a good one. Honeycomb?
Yeah.
Not bad?
Yeah.
Cocoa Puffs.
Reese's Puffs.
Okay.
That might have been my childhood. I don't know if that was a thing prior to
those
the
are
90s,
both good.
But...
Cocoa Puffs are good too.
I just think of the commercial.
Then you get the chocolate milk at the end. Okay.
Trix?
That's fine. Trix okay.
Silly Wabbit.
Trix very Trix to me.
Lucky Charms hasn't been mentioned.
I only took the marshmallows. I was one of those.
Trix to me are like the Texas Rangers. They're just there.
Okay. Just won the World Series.
I know, but I'm just saying, traditionally speaking, right? They're just there.
Sure.
Maybe the Rangers is a bad one. The Minnesota Twins.
Okay.
Trix is the Minnesota Twins. They're there.
Sure.
They're fine.
Sure.
They're sufficient. The Reese's Puffs, a little too rich. After a while, no.
Solid after bowl drink of the milk, though, with the Reese's Puffs.
That's probably true.
You just did it. You did it with the E.
What's that?
Milk.
Solid drink of the milk?
When I that time.
You do say milk from time to time.
Is that my Indiana showing? Is that an Indiana
I don't
thing?
know.
Or is
No,
that like a
because
tomato
Derek
thing?
Schultz says the same thing, and he's from Connecticut or wherever the hell he's from. What about the seasonal cereals? Booberry, Frankenberry,
yeah, Booberry. My wife's partial to the Booberry.
Count Chocula. Is Count Chocula?
I think that adjusted at some point from being a seasonal to a year-round.
Is it a year-round? Kaboom, you guys.
Amplified.
Okay, King Vitamin. Am I going now too old school here?
Don't have you.
King Vitamin, and back when we'd have King Vitamin on Saturdays, we'd have Kaboom. They didn't. You guys probably didn't have Saturday morning cartoons, right?
Yeah, sure.
You did?
Yes. Little Scooby-Doo, little Tom and Jerry, sure, yeah.
Okay, they had. Okay, I didn't know if that was done by the time you guys were around.
No, Cartoon Network still was
by
big
the way,
on the.
Do you want to know something about Tom and Jerry, real quick?
Do I? You're gonna ruin something for us here?
I've mentioned this before as well, but I'll do it again, and I don't know if it's going to ruin it for you or not.
All right.
You ready?
Yeah.
Tom and Jerry. Describe Tom and Jerry for me, please, Jimmy Cook. Cartoon Tom and Jerry. Please describe to me.
Tom is always trying to capture Jerry the mouse, and very rarely does it ever wind up working out in Tom's favor. He often gets bullied by other people, including the dog, who I'm forgetting his name, that always protects. But yeah, it's the classic cat and mouse. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like me and Jake.
Eddie, is that how you would describe Tom and Jerry?
I view them as brothers.
Tom and Jerry, you ready for this?
I've heard you say this before, but go on.
Tom and Jerry actually best friends. Tom and Jerry are best friends because if you think about it, they do things in cahoots with one another until the old lady is around, and then they pretend as though Tom is chasing Jerry so that Tom is not replaced. Because there was one episode where she kicks Tom out and goes to get another cat because Jerry is still around. So then Jerry realizes it, and as a result, Tom and Jerry, because they are best buddies, the entire thing is an act as if they are antagonists of one another so that the homeowner thinks that Tom's doing his job.
I have heard you say that before.
Alex Glutton has chimed in to me and Jimmy. Rice Krispies with no sugar is terrible.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's fair. You got to put sugar on. You absolutely need to put the sugar on there, right? Captain Crunch. Okay, Captain Crunch, good, except for the strange film at the top of your mouth.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Kix mixed with Cocoa Puffs. That's not bad, but that is clearly somebody's mom trying to make it somewhat passable, right? Sugar Smacks, yeah, okay.
In adulthood, I've switched to, and that's part because I'm slightly on a health kick to some regard. I've gone to Magic Spoon. Have you had any of that?
Magic Spoon?
It's more like calorie. They have like cocoa, type of fruity. It's just a healthier version of cereal, but they've been good. Highly recommend.
Thank you, my buddy Kevin. The Moose Cup was from Hardee's. Thank you. It was the large size cup at Hardee's, but it was like the to-go cup that you could get. Several people chiming in that Kix was in fact terrible. Cap'n Crunch good, but the Berry Crunch better. Right?
Either of you granola eaters?
Yeah, granola's cool.
Occasionally. Wait, no, only in bar form. Is that what you're talking about? You're talking about granola bars?
No.
No, only
in bar form.
Only bar form.
Granola's cool.
Eat it with banana?
Oatmeal?
Yeah, I was going to ask you for an oatmeal.
I do like oatmeal, yeah.
Nope.
How about grits?
No.
Fine, I'm not against them.
Hominy?
How many what?
Thank you. Well played, Eddie. Very well played. By the way, JMV coming up in 30. We'll find out what he's got going on. Jimmy's plays in about 15 minutes
Brother Bob,
as well.
Chimes in, and maybe this was already said, Quisp?
Oh, yeah, Quisp. The Quisp fella, as a matter of fact, I could be wrong in this. The Quisp fella, he didn't have the propeller-type hat, but he kind of looked like the Cubert guy. Am I wrong in this?
I don't know.
Hold on. Yeah. So again, the Quisp fella, he doesn't have it's not propellers, it's big ears or something, right?
Yes, I don't think I have a way. Oh, I can't. Hold on.
But am I just thinking of the letter Q when I say that he looks like the Cubert fella?
Eddie, can you ready 3, take 3 over here in my camera talk?
I could, but got the midsection.
Sorry, we can take the belly of Jake Query for 30 seconds. I think it's worth the explanation.
I mean, the belly's
gotten
gotten smaller. Are you giving any credit here? This kind of sexiness is
the YouTube audience can now see your Quisp fella.
Yeah. Boy, I hate to say that the Quisp kid looks special, doesn't he?
I just like how you have a longer shirt on today, so we don't get to see the The actual midsection.
The quiz.
Do you usually get to see my belly button?
Not the mid. If you raise your arm sometimes.
More like the Edmonton Oilers.
It's off. Well, nope. You can still see it up there. All right, never mind.
Let's go Oilers! Yes!
This hour of The Fan is fueled by...
1-300-5421.
This is about to be big. You can tell.
Josh says, not to complain, but you guys talk about auto racing and soccer all the time, but never about swimming and tennis.
Last time we talked about
when we had
soccer.
Chris Plum on the show, and I can't remember the last time we talked about
we talked
soccer.
about it for 5 seconds today when Jake asked about what kit I was wearing.
Oh, that's right.
That was it. So way too much time there. 5 seconds.
Auto racing, considering that I do the broadcast for IndyCar racing.
Wait, you do?
And the Indy 500 is the largest single-day spectator sport in the world, and we did our show out there for a week, and I think in that time had on like 2 people. Then I would say, actually, relatively speaking, we don't talk auto racing that much. Furthermore, I know we don't talk about swimming at all. Josh, you are correct. As a matter of fact, you must not have been listening at the top of the show when I recapped last night going and seeing a world record at the U.S. swimming Olympic trials. You must not have been listening when I said that the Olympic trials, in my opinion, in 20 years will be looked upon as a watershed moment that helped re-jumpstart Indianapolis's connection to sports and how awesome it's been to be able to see that throughout Indianapolis. You probably weren't listening when we had Chris Plum on, who is the coordinating swimmer and CEO of Carmel Swim and the head coach at Carmel that's won 38 straight swim titles when we talked about that earlier in the week. You probably won't be listening this week when we have on Rowdy Gaines, who is, of course, doing the NBC commentary for the Olympic trials in swimming, or the fact that I asked both Jimmy and Eddie about the fact where they would want to sit if they went last night or recounted sitting in section 422 and why that was awesome and why I enjoyed it, and seeing the Pan Am building going into the swimming trials yesterday and discussing that. And maybe you weren't listening when we gave away not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but I believe 8 pairs of tickets, actually foursomes of tickets for it over the last 2 weeks for the Olympic swimming trials, and the fact that
10.
we mentioned it literally every single day. 10. So we gave away 40 tickets to it over the last 5 to 7 days, something like that. So outside of that, you're right. We haven't discussed it at all.
Hey,
I mean,
but
zero.
But
none.
to balance the scales a little bit, since I will talk about it again during the plays of the day, we are 12 days from the greatest spectacle in tennis when Wimbledon arrives, July 1st through the 14th. So there you go.
Do you like Wimbledon? Cheerio, you ever go out and watch yourself playing on a little bit of the grass?
That's a different one.
Yeah, I sometimes I just mix these up.
By the way, Jake, at the top of the
different part of the UK.
You were talking about like Willie Mays with him passing away yesterday.
Correct.
And Jimmy shared his thoughts about Willie Mays as well. But to me, I don't think he'll get enough respect in this regard. And hopefully now he does. He was arguably the first power speed combo of a player in MLB history. And he did it for the entirety of his career. I mean, 24 All-Star games and 22 seasons. You're like, Eddie, how's that possible?
Okay, go ahead.
They had multiple All-Star games back in the day to help draw in fans to watch the sport and go see Willie Mays. Like, people who used to say that the All-Star game was created for Willie Mays. I mean, he's one of one.
Yeah, that got me right there, right? In the number disparity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Willie Mays, as I mentioned earlier, Eddie, and thank you for bringing that back up. You are correct. He was the first. The reason that Willie Mays' passing is so significant, he was 93 years old. That is a good full life, no question about it. But Willie Mays, in the level of his icon, is because of the fact, and yes, I do believe that he, at the time of his passing, was the greatest American living sports icon. Part of that is because icon is determined by, to an extent, the age, the history that goes into it, but also the symbolism of what it represents. There have been other athletes that are more famous, more well-known, more ubiquitous, more marketable, but he was all of those things in his prime, for sure. But he also was the last link to a bygone era of when baseball was the most popular sport in the United States and the one that was the most romanticized amongst, in particular, kids in this country. And as I mentioned earlier, in an era where baseball was seen on television in black and white, the world was black and white to a great extent. And for kids that were hearing about their heroes on the radio and not seeing them, but creating in their mind the heroic descriptions of what they were hearing, all they knew about Willie Mays was that he was a great baseball player that was larger than life. And then for many people in this country, Willie Mays was like their first black friend in an era where you didn't have that as much, that crossover. And the integration of baseball, Jackie Robinson was the first to cross the color barrier, but Willie Mays was really the first to kind of bring it all together and was the first, to Eddie's point, 5-tool player. He is the only player to have a 300 career average with over 600 home runs and at least 10 seasons of a Gold Glove. He had 12, I believe. He is arguably the greatest defensive player of all time.
Ties Roberto Clemente for the most Gold Glovers amongst outfielders, yeah.
Yeah, and he was arguably the greatest defensive player ever, and that includes Johnny Bench at catcher, whatever else. But there are players that were perhaps the best at one specific area. There might have been better home run hitters. There might have been better contact hitters. There might have been better base stealers. But in terms of the overall score in each of those categories, he had the highest accumulation essentially in baseball. But more so, it's the fact that Willie Mays was doing variety shows. He was doing Saturday Home Run Derby television shows, and he was, in a time when baseball was the American pastime, he transcended it into other areas of entertainment in the United States once he became a star. And he did so while serving 2 years in the service, missing seasons to do that, and then coming back in 54, being the most valuable player, making the most famous catch in baseball, and doing so all the while putting forth the example of how to treat people with the nickname of Say Hey Kid because of the way that he would greet people and his larger-than-life personality at a time where, because of the color of his skin, it doesn't mean that all people were willing to treat him the same initially, if not for the fact he was a baseball star. That era of baseball, that era of yesteryear of kids racing home from school for midday World Series fall classics and getting trading cards and putting them on their bicycles and enacting players of their hero while playing sandlot baseball days, to a large extent, that is an era in the United States that is gone. And he was the last piece of it to connect us to those glory days of baseball when baseball was king and boxing was probably right behind it. Baseball's been bypassed for certain, but in all areas, he represented so many things about this country, both good and bad. In the bad, meaning he reminded us of some of the bad things because of his ability to overcome them in this country. And truly an American hero, both from military and athletic accomplishment in the way that he conducted himself, and a great, great, great player. And not only that, but as my friend Mac Engel from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram wrote about, Mac being a writer that covers Major League Baseball, was once covering a game in San Francisco and was in the clubhouse where Barry Bonds was taking the day off, and Willie Mays, who is the godfather of Barry Bonds, came in and ripped him upside down the other, half kiddingly, half seriously, and F-bombed him several times and for not playing that day, mostly in jest, but making his point. And Mac said he walked away, and one of the members of the Giants came up to Mac Engel and said, that is literally the only man on earth that Barry Bonds would take that from. And there's nothing that Barry Bonds, who is now arguably inheriting the throne as the greatest living player, even though Bonds, you can say what you want about the steroid stuff. Bonds, the enigmatic thing about Barry Bonds is I don't even know that he needed the performance-enhancing drugs that he allegedly was involved in to increase. He already was a great 5-tool player. Bonds was an unbelievable player. But to show you how great Willie Mays was, even a player like Barry Bonds deferred to that because he was that great. No question about it. Come back, get Jimmy's plays of the day next.
Do you need air
win. This is how I win.
Today's plays of the day, we've got plenty of baseball bets, but first we go across the pond. Euro 2024 still ongoing with group play, match day 2 of 3, as it were, as teams vie to qualify. Germany, the first team of any to qualify. That happened earlier today. In their same group, it's Scotland versus Switzerland. It's an if not now, when moment for Scotland. They're trying to qualify out of the group stage for the first time in their history, tied for the oldest international team in all of soccer. We'll take Scotland to win the money line over Switzerland, that at plus 330. In baseball, we'll take the Milwaukee Brewers to win the money line over the Los Angeles Angels. We'll take Cute Fella and the Baltimore Orioles to win over the New York Yankees. Though, in that game, as there's a lot of root for me coming from the Orioles fans, it is the debut this season for Yankees ace Garrett Cole. We will take him over 5.5 strikeouts in that game. Eddie, any bets from you?
I'm in mourning, so no.
Why are you in mourning?
The Reds just lost 1-0.
I'm sorry.
To the Pirates.
My
Meaning
condolences.
they lost 2 of 3 to the Pirates.
My condolences.
You can say 1-0.
Hey, you were right about the Astros
I could,
yesterday,
Jake,
though.
but what'd you say?
You were right about the Astros yesterday, though.
Yep.
Not only did they not lay 1.5 successfully, they lost 2-0.
They didn't lay 1.
They didn't lay any.
I have a question for you guys where I need your help being hip.
Okay. Glad you finally are coming around to us.
Yeah, you
being
came to the
hip.
right place. Yep.
This sort of fashion advice, I'm coming from a guy that yesterday was wearing a huge rooster on his soccer shirt.
It was a couple days ago, but that's fine. Oh, and the other guy was in full Colts mode when there's no significant Colts stuff.
I told you, Jimmy, I needed to do laundry, and that was one of the clean shirts that I had. I was like,
so when you go to a sporting event or a concert or something like that, and you buy a shirt that has the date on it, what is the window of time that has to pass before it's retroly cool, and what is the window of time that you have to wear it before you then have to wait for that window? Does that make sense what I'm saying? So we're in 2024.
Okay.
If you have a shirt like, a Notre Dame bowl game shirt or whatever it might be, it is acceptable to wear going how far back that it is still considered current, and then what is the most recent year before that where you can wear it because it is now retro?
Okay, so from my standpoint, from a concert standpoint, and this is just me not being a music buff, I think instantly once you've bought it, you're good. Like there probably is a certain moment where it becomes full retro, right? Like so we'll say 10 years. I'll say 10 years. But from a sports standpoint, especially if it's one you went to where you had rooting interest and you bought, like, for example, if your team won an AFC title, but they lost the Super Bowl, you're not wearing that AFC title shirt until at least 10 years afterwards
10.
because you're second best. You're first loser.
Here's why I asked.
Sure.
I just did a recent, clothing purge, right?
Another one?
Yes.
Was it as big as the
No,
Great Purge?
nothing eclipses the Great Post-Heart Attack Purge.
Okay.
But I have a T-shirt that I really like. It's a cool T-shirt, and it's from the inaugural season of the Indy 11. And it says, Indy Fuel from 2014. So it says it has 2 gloves on it.
Sure.
And one of them it says, I can't remember what it's recognizing in terms of pro hockey in Indianapolis or something, but it says 1939. Then the other one says 2014, and it says Indy Fuel inaugural season. Now, that was 10 years ago. So is it dude, what are you doing? Or is it now? Have we reached a point where it's well, that's cool to wear now?
I think at least 10 years. Eddie, would you agree with that? I say at least 10 years for a retro item if you're sensitive about it.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
So I'm good right now. If it's a 2014, I'm good, right?
Yeah, I think you're set.
You're good anyway, Jake.
But for me, it changes with concerts because especially if it's a big artist, that's cool. Like if it was a Billy Joel T-shirt from MSG or a Taylor Swift shirt, that's instantly fine.
I have a T-shirt from the Joshua Tree 30-year anniversary tour that's from 2017, and it says on it 1987, 2017. Like Joshua Tree. So it's from 2017.
Yeah, I think you're good. Again, I'm not the music buff. I'll use for an example, though, one of my brother, Rich, He's a big, like Steely Dan, likes yacht rock music. He's been to a number of concerts. I've seen him wear shirts that are from the last 5 or 6 years that he wore 2 to 3 years after he had it. So I feel like you're good from a musical standpoint once you've gone, because like, oh, you saw that band play. That's neat. I think with sports, there's a certain point where it's like, dude, why are you wearing a
like
2022?
If I'm wearing a Clemson 2018 Orange Bowl shirt, is it kind of like what's going on there? That then you're in the workout pile, right?
Like for example, we joked about how like I have enough Chief shirts to be able to represent a small army, which is probably true. Like this past year's Super Bowl, let's say they don't win it next year, I will wear that all this season, but then it goes into the archives until it's more retro.
Okay, what about this? So I have a shirt from a national semifinal that Clemson won, but they lost in the title game.
That's one I probably
that
never
pertains
wear.
to Jimmy with all of his Notre Dame stuff, so he's an expert in that regard.
That's true. I don't wear, if they did not win, I don't wear second place stuff.
After multiple national championships for Clemson, in one of the games that they played, my buddy Al Larson went to Iowa State, and they played Iowa State in the Cheez-It Bowl. And so the bet that we had was the loser had to buy the winner the winning T-shirt. So I have a T-shirt. It's a cool T-shirt.
Clemson.
With Clemson and Iowa State on it, and it has Cheez-Its on it.
Yeah, like
from the Cheez-It Bowl.
Once you've seen Perry, at what point are you wearing the Cheez-It? No, you're wearing the national title shirt. And the Cheez-It shirt should only appear for ironic days or a 10-year period, I would say.
Proud of the Cheez-It Bowl championship.
Admittedly, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, you take what you can get, right? And the Cheez-Its, by the white cheddar Cheez-Its.
Good stuff.
Oh, you kidding me?
All right.
You kidding me? John's up next. James, is John here today?
I'm partial to the my most obscure favorite junk food snack like that is the twisty Fritos, the honey barbecue ones.
Not
the
bad.
twists?
Yes.
But when it comes to snack chips, there's one flavor that is the creme de la creme.
Ketchup.
The ketchup chips are great, but that's not it.
Sour cream and onion.
Sour cream's good, not it.
Salt and vinegar.
Salt and vinegar, good, not it.
Pizza Pringles.
Pizza Pringles, very good, not it. When I say this, both of you are going to go, yeah, you're right.
Nacho cheese.
Nacho cheese, very good, that's not it.
Oh, man. All right.
Chili cheese Fritos.
I'll take the barbecue over those. They are good,
No,
but I'll take
disagree.
the barbecue over them.
Barbecue Fritos are also good.
Disagree with which part? With me or with?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'll take honey barbecue.
They're also good.
All the way.
J&B is in. John, big show lined up.
Oh, I'm spilling crap all over the countertop here. Yeah, I think so. Pascal Siakam. And then all these clowns are coming up with ways you got to trade everybody right now.
That's right.
To get Mikal Bridges. What the hell would anybody want to trade Benedict Mathurin for? What the hell's wrong with people? How stupid?
We were talking about how because it's a 4-year deal instead of 5, they've given themselves some flexibility in that.
How stupid are people? We've got to make sure the stupid people don't take over.
Okay. Well, it's like the stupid guy that said that I don't talk about swimming enough when I went to the trials last night.
I had some guy call me yesterday and wanted to trade Tyrese Halliburton.
Really?
Yeah.
For who?
I have no idea.
Mikal Bridges?
Yeah, just anybody. Yeah, anybody. So, yeah.
All right, John's up next.
Yep.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back with you at noon tomorrow.
The Ride with JMV.